Welcome to ancient Egypt, a sleepy journey through the land of gods. Step into the timeless world of ancient Egypt, where mighty gods rule the skies, the earth, and the afterlife. As you drift off to sleep, imagine the golden sun rising with Ra, the fierce battles of Horus and Seth, and the gentle protection of Bastet. This isn't just history, it's a story of gods who shape the world, life, death, and rebirth. So get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the whispers of the Nile and the legends of immortal gods guide you into a peaceful slumber. Would you like an awakening in the two lands, a day in ancient Egypt? The night is quiet in the land of Kemet, the Black Land, named for the rich, dark soil that lines the banks of the Great Nile. Before the sun rises, the sky is a deep violet, dotted with faint stars, and the world still feels heavy with dreams. Somewhere along the river's edge, in a village made of mud brick houses huddled together like resting cattle, the stillness begins to break. In one modest home, a reed mat stirs as a man begins to wake. You are that man, or perhaps a woman, living not as a pharaoh, not as a priest, not even a scribe. You are an ordinary Egyptian. Your home is small and square, with no glass windows or polished furniture, only bare essentials. A few pots for storing water and grain, a simple stone grinder for flour, and a small altar niche carved into the wall where a painted amulet of Bez, the dwarf god of protection, watches over you as you sleep. You rise with the rhythm of the Nile, as your ancestors have for centuries. Time in Egypt is not kept by clocks, but by light, by harvests, and by the flooding of the river. You're already behind if the sky is lightning. There's work to be done, always. Outside, the air is still cool. The dew clings faintly to the reeds, and a thin mist snakes across the surface of the water. The Nile murmurs softly, ever steady, a divine artery of the world. It is not just a river, but a god in itself. Hapi, the nourisher, the bringer of abundance. You've known since childhood that the river's moods shape life. When Hapi is generous, there is bread. When he is stingy, there is hunger. As you walk barefoot along the compacted earth path behind your house, the smells of village life drift around you. The scent of cooking fires just being lit, the musty sweetness of stored grain, the faint odor of livestock kept behind homes. Chickens rustle, a donkey brays. Somewhere a woman is already baking flatbread on a rounded stone, the sizzle of flour and water mixing with quiet humming. You eat simply, maybe a slice of bread, rough and nutty, dipped in a bit of honey if your household has done well. Some beer, too, of course. It's not the beer you know from modern times. It's thick, soupy, made from barley, and consumed as casually as water. Egyptians believe it was a gift from the gods, brewed first by the lion-headed goddess Sekhmet before she turned gentle. It fills you, even if it leaves grit between your teeth. Before your day begins, there is one thing you do without fail. You offer a small prayer. You may not be literate. Most aren't. But that doesn't mean you're not deeply spiritual. The gods are everywhere, and your life depends on their favor. You might raise your hands to the eastern sky, where a faint glow is appearing, and murmur thanks to Ra, the sun god, as he readies his ascent across the heavens in his great solar barque. Every morning he rises, triumphing once again over the serpent Apophis, who tried to devour him in the underworld. And because of that, the day begins. You might whisper a prayer to Anubis as well. Not because you're thinking about death, but because in this world, death is never far. Disease, missteps, and misfortune can all carry you swiftly to the scales of judgment. Better to live rightly, to remember the gods even in the small moments. With the light brightening, your village begins to hum. Some gather tools and head to the fields. Others prepare to tend cattle, fetch water, or set off for workshops in the nearby town. Your life depends on the Nile and the sun, and you follow their lead. You may work irrigating crops along the basin, coaxing wheat and flax from the earth. Or perhaps you're a potter, hands worn and caked with clay, shaping vessels that will one day carry oil or perfume to distant temples. But whatever your trade, it is done under the watchful eye of the gods. Horus, the falcon god, soars in the thoughts of every farmer and soldier, his sharp eye a symbol of vigilance and kingship. Pharaoh himself is believed to be Horus incarnate, the living link between mortal and divine. You likely will never meet him, but his name is spoken with awe, carved into stone, painted in tombs, and burned onto your tongue with reverence. Midday comes fast, and the sun blazes high. Shade is precious. You might rest beneath a palm, sharing dried dates and bread with fellow laborers. Conversation, if there is time, is murmured and slow. Perhaps you exchange stories passed from parent to child, tales of how Isis searched for the body of Osiris, how she wept and brought him back from death, how their son Horus fought Seth, the red god, in endless battles of sand and storm. These are more than myths. They are mirrors of the world, symbols for floods and droughts, justice and revenge, life and afterlife. Your body is tired. The work is constant. And yet you find beauty in the rhythm, the certainty of sunrise, the scent of wet earth, the shapes of gods carved into doorways and painted on plaster. Even in hardship, there is order, and that is sacred. The concept of Ma'at, the balance of the world, guides everything. To live in harmony with Ma'at is to live rightly, honestly, modestly, responsibly. To stray brings chaos, and chaos invites Seth. Evening brings orange skies and longer shadows. You return home, feet dusty, body sore, but spirit intact. Maybe you pass a shrine, a simple stone platform with offerings of beer, flowers, or carved bread. You pause and give thanks, whispering your hopes for the health of your children, the fertility of your crops, the peace of your ancestors. At night, your home is lit by a flickering oil lamp. You lie on your mat, perhaps listening to the sounds of the Nile outside. Frogs croak, crickets chirp. In the distance, a flute plays softly, a lullaby for the gods. You fall asleep knowing that Ra must again face Apophis. You trust that he will win, as he always has. And if he does not, if the serpent consumes the sun, then all is lost. But that hasn't happened yet. Not once in all your years. So you sleep in trust, wrapped in faith, lulled by myth, surrounded by gods. Tomorrow you will rise again, and the cycle will begin once more. The waters of none, creation before time began. Before time, before land, before sky, there was only stillness. No sound stirred, no wind moved, no sun shone. There was only none. The endless, formless sea of darkness, deep and inert. Not a place, not a god with limbs or voice, but an eternal presence of potential, infinite water, infinite silence. And somewhere within that silence, something stirred. You wouldn't have lasted a moment here, not because the water would drown you, but because time hadn't been born yet. There was no breath to breathe, no surface to cling to. It wasn't chaos as we understand it. It was pre-being, a still womb of creation. And then came the first ripple. From the heart of none rose a mound, a single hill breaking through the dark waters. The Egyptians called it the Ben stone, the first piece of dry land, sacred and shimmering with the promise of existence. On that hill stood the very first god, Adam, the self-created one. No mother bore him, no father shaped him. He emerged alone, containing within himself the seeds of all creation. You might say he was lonely, or simply compelled by divine purpose. Adam, needing to create company and continue the work of making the world, did something most curious. He coughed, or perhaps he sneezed. Stories differ, and from his bodily exhalation came his children, Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture, a pair of twins, elements of balance, breath, and humidity. Shu would lift the sky, Tefnut would bless the earth, and so the world began to form. Shu and Tefnut wandered into the vastness of none, exploring the still shapeless edges of creation. Atum, left alone, grew anxious. Time still had barely begun, and already his creations had slipped away. In his worry, he plucked out his eye, a divine eye of fire and sight, and sent it searching for his lost children. When the eye found them and returned, Atum wept with joy. And where his tears fell on the new earth, life was born. Men and women sprung from the divine emotion of a god reunited with his family. The eye itself became something more, the Eye of Ra, a powerful, fiery force that would later act on his behalf, sometimes as protection, sometimes as wrath. With Shu and Tefnut returned, the work of creation continued. From their union came Geb, the god of the earth, and Nut, the goddess of the sky. They loved each other so deeply, they lay locked in an eternal embrace. But their father, Shu, the air, pushed them apart. He raised Nut high above, arching her body over the world like a canopy of stars, while Geb lay below, becoming the very ground upon which all beings would live. Every day, Nut would birth the sun, the fiery disk of Ra, and each night she would swallow it whole, only to birth it again by morning. This cycle of rising and falling, of dawn and dusk, became the heartbeat of the world. Time began to march forward. From this divine family of air, moisture, sky, and earth, the universe emerged, structured, predictable, alive. And yet it was not without complexity. Gods continued to be born, and among them were Osiris and Isis, Seth and Nephthys, siblings who would carry both the blessing and the burden of what it means to be divine and flawed. But all of it, the hills, the people, the stars, the gods, came from none. The Egyptians did not imagine their world erupting in violence or lightning. No great battle began creation. Instead, it was a slow, organic unfolding, like lotus petals opening in the morning sun. The image of the lotus was sacred for that very reason. It rose from the still waters of Nun, blooming in the light of Ra, a symbol of rebirth, of gentle persistence, of eternal cycles. This first moment of creation was never forgotten. In temples throughout Egypt, priests performed daily rituals that echoed the original emergence. They washed statues and lit incense, not simply as acts of worship, but as reenactments of that first divine order rising from the primordial sea. Each sunrise was not just a new day, but a return to the beginning of time. Every temple was built to represent the Benben, the sacred mound, and every prayer was a reaffirmation that order Ma'at still ruled the world. But you, a visitor from a world of clocks and skyscrapers, would struggle to understand how real these stories were. Not metaphors, not myths meant for children, but truths. Truths as solid as stone, as eternal as the pyramids. To an Egyptian, none still existed, just below the surface. The Nile flowed from it. The underworld bordered it. And without rituals to maintain order, that formless chaos could return at any time. Ra, the sun god who would come to dominate the pantheon, was often linked to this primordial time. It was said that he rose from the waters of Nun on the back of a celestial lotus, or from the mound itself. As the world aged and grew more complex, Ra remained a tether to the original purity of creation. He was both a daily presence and an ancient force. His rays weren't just sunlight, they were the essence of divine order. And then there were the others, gods like Ta, the craftsman, who shaped the world with words, and Khnum, who molded people on a potter's wheel from the clay of the Nile. These were later understandings of the same story, that creation was deliberate, skilled, divine. Whether from a breath, a word, a sneeze, or a spinning wheel of clay, life was always sacred. As night falls, you might sit beside the Nile and watch the stars appear above Nut's heavenly arch. Somewhere deep in the river's flow, you can still sense the pull of Nun, a quiet depth that has no bottom, a whispering stillness just beyond sound. The ancients would say that without constant care, the world might slip back into that silence, not as punishment, but as nature's default, as if the world were only ever borrowed from the void. And so they lit lamps, they prayed, they built monuments, not out of fear, but out of gratitude, for the light, for the earth, for the chance to live even a short span between the beginning and the end. You would not have lasted a day in that beginning, not because it was violent or cruel, but because it required faith, patience, and an understanding of time that moved in circles, not lines. But for the Egyptians, that eternal return was a comfort. Each sunrise was proof that Ra had once again risen from Nun, and that life once again had found its way from silence into song. Ra rises, the sun god and the birth of the world. In the ancient hush before time began, when the universe was formless and dark, the great cosmic waters known as Nun stretched endlessly. There was no land, no sky, no humans, no gods, only a swirling sea of potential, silent and still. From this eternal void stirred a presence, a radiant force of life and fire that would give form to chaos. This force was Ra, the great sun god, whose emergence marked the beginning of time, space, and creation itself. He rose, not from earth or sky, but from the sacred lotus flower, blooming upon the surface of the primeval waters at dawn's first breath. As the petals unfurled, so too did existence. Ra was self-created, born from his own will and divine essence. He was Atum, the complete one, who contained within himself all that would come to be. With eyes that burned like the midday sun, and a voice that cracked the silence of the deep, Ra spoke creation into being. With each divine utterance, he summoned aspects of the cosmos. He named Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, goddess of moisture, and they sprang forth, twins of balance and motion. From their union came Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky, whose love would shape the physical world. Yet Ra's rise was more than mere emergence. His ascent was the spark that lit the stars, the fuel that ignited the furnace of life. In the mythology of Heliopolis, the sun's first rising is the epicenter of all existence. As Ra rose into the sky on the eastern horizon each morning, he brought light, order, and time. Every sunrise was a reenactment of that original birth, a reaffirmation of cosmic stability and divine power. Ra's body radiated light so powerful that even the gods averted their gaze. His daily journey across the sky in his solar barque was not only a passage of time, but a sacred procession that mirrored the journey of life itself, from birth at dawn through the vigor of midday to the descent into death at dusk. But Ra's disappearance over the horizon was never the end. Each night he traveled the Duat, the shadowy underworld, facing darkness and danger, only to rise again victorious with the morning sun. This cyclical triumph over death reaffirmed his sovereignty over existence. The people of ancient Egypt lived their lives bound to Ra's rhythm. His presence dictated their agriculture, festivals, and daily routines. Temples opened at dawn and closed at dusk, mimicking his path across the heavens. Farmers tilled the land beneath his gaze, and scribes recorded time by the position of his golden orb. Ra was more than a god. He was the axis of their world, the embodiment of time, fate, and divine kingship. His primary center of worship was Heliopolis, the city of the sun. There stood the legendary Benben stone, the sacred mound said to be the first land to rise from none. Upon it, Ra first stood, his light breaking the eternal darkness. The pyramids themselves echoed this myth, each structure a symbolic Benben, aligning with the solar path and reflecting the ascent of divine kings to join Ra in the sky. Though mighty and alone at the dawn of time, Ra recognized the necessity of company and creation. From his divine form, he wept tears that gave rise to humanity. These humans revered him, but as time passed, their loyalty waned. Displeased by their disobedience, Ra sent forth his eye, often embodied by the fierce goddess Sekhmet, to punish them. But the destruction she wrought was so vast that Ra, in pity, halted her wrath by tricking her into drinking a river of beer dyed red like blood. Her fury pacified, Sekhmet transformed into the gentler Bastet, goddess of joy and protection. This tale not only explained humanity's origin, but also highlighted the duality of Ra's power, merciful and terrible, creative and destructive. He was the flame of life and the fire of judgment. No force in heaven or earth could rival him. Even the great serpent Apophis, born from chaos, challenged him in vain. Each night, Ra battled Apophis in the Duat, defending the world from entropy. The fact that the sun rose each day was proof of his victory. Ra's divine essence permeated all things, and many other gods were seen as aspects or extensions of him. Atum-Ra represented his complete self, Khepri the morning sun, and Khnum his creative force. Later he merged with Amun, the hidden god, to form Amun-Ra, symbolizing both hidden mystery and visible power. In every fusion, Ra remained central, his solar nature ever vital. As the supreme deity, Ra was also intimately connected with kingship. Pharaohs were considered sons of Ra, ruling with divine mandate. Their crowns bore the sun disk, and their temples aligned with celestial events tied to his journey. Upon death, they hoped to ascend into the sky and join Ra in his solar barque, sailing across the heavens in eternal glory. Ra's iconography is as brilliant as his myth. He is often depicted with a falcon head crowned with a blazing sun disk, encircled by a serpent, a symbol of divine protection. At other times, he appears as a scarab beetle, Khepri, pushing the sun across the sky like a ball of dung, symbolizing rebirth. He may also take the form of a ram, a phoenix, or a cat, all sacred symbols echoing different phases of his power. Even as the pantheon evolved and other gods gained prominence, Ra's place remained fixed at the core. He was the dawn and dusk, the fire and breath, the reason the Nile flowed and the grain grew. His myth was not just a story. It was a cosmic truth encoded in temples, tombs, and time itself. In every golden sunrise over the desert, in every temple aligned to the equinox, and in every whisper of wind across the papyrus reeds, Ra still speaks. He is not just the god of the sun, but the eternal moment when darkness yields to light and the world begins anew. The divine family, Geb, Nut, and the children of the sky. In the vast and vibrant cosmos of ancient Egyptian mythology, few tales shimmer with celestial beauty and symbolic weight as much as the story of the divine family. Geb, the god of the earth, Nut, the goddess of the sky, and their four divine children, Osiris, Isis, Seth, and Nephthys. This powerful lineage lies at the heart of the mythological tapestry, shaping the destiny of both gods and men. Their saga is one of love and separation, chaos and balance, birth and betrayal, a foundational myth that attempts to explain the structure of the world and the divine forces that govern life and death. In the beginning, there was nothing but the primordial waters of none. From this infinite dark abyss, the first god, Atum, emerged. He created Shu, the god of air, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture. Shu and Tefnut gave birth to Geb and Nut, siblings who were also bound in a deep and powerful love. Geb, solid and unmoving, was the earth itself, while Nut arched over him as the star-speckled sky. The lovers' embrace was so intimate that the world had no space to exist between them. They lay entwined, sky pressing close to the earth, leaving no room for life or light. Atum, disturbed by this claustrophobic union, commanded their father Shu to intervene. With great effort, Shu lifted Nut away from Geb, creating the world as we know it, a realm with earth below and sky above. Nut wept at her forced separation from Geb, and her tears became the rain that nourished the earth. Geb, too, trembled with longing, and his tremors formed the mountains. Though parted, their love remained eternal, each longing glance across the heavens symbolizing the enduring bond between sky and earth. This divine separation was not only an act of cosmic necessity, but also a symbolic moment. The world was born through tension and division, an eternal balance between opposites. From this structured cosmos came life, and with it came the birth of four children who would shape the fate of the divine and human realms alike. First came Osiris, the eldest and noblest. He was wise, just, and beloved by all, a god of fertility, kingship, and the afterlife. He ruled Egypt as a mortal king, bringing civilization, laws, and agriculture to the people. His sister Isis, born next, was equally revered. She was the goddess of magic, healing, and motherhood, an intelligent and powerful presence who would become known as the protector of the throne. Then came Seth, the wild and unpredictable god of storms, chaos, and the desert. Red-haired and fierce, he was the embodiment of destruction and disorder, a necessary counterpart to Osiris's serenity. Finally, Nephthys emerged, a mysterious and quiet goddess associated with dusk, mourning, and protection. Though she often worked behind the scenes, Nephthys held immense power in the realms of magic and the transition between life and death. The family dynamic of these five deities, Geb, Nut, and their children, encapsulated the essence of the ancient Egyptian worldview. The importance of balance, the tension between order and chaos, and the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. Their relationships were not just mythic stories, but reflections of the natural and spiritual forces that governed every aspect of Egyptian life. Geb, often depicted as a reclining man with green skin, symbolizing fertility and vegetation, was the embodiment of the earth and its bounty. As the physical ground upon which humans lived and crops grew, he held within him the seed of life. He also had a darker aspect. He was the resting place of the dead, the cradle to which all returned. His laughter was said to cause earthquakes, and his body was covered with animals and plants, making him both nurturing and unpredictable. Nut, on the other hand, was a goddess of infinite grace and mystery. Painted as a woman arching over the earth with her body adorned by stars, she was seen as the nightly sky who swallowed the sun each evening and gave birth to it anew each morning. Her body was the pathway through which Ra, the sun god, traveled during his nightly journey in the Duat, the underworld. Her protection stretched over all living beings, and she was often invoked in tombs and coffins to shelter the deceased in the afterlife. Together, Geb and Nut's daily interaction, the sky arching above and the earth lying below, was a perpetual reminder of their love and sacrifice. Every sunrise and sunset, every rainfall and harvest was attributed to their divine roles and interactions. Their relationship was a living metaphor for the eternal rhythms of the world. The mythology also tells of a divine decree from Ra, the supreme sun god, forbidding Nut to give birth on any day of the year. Ra, fearing that her children would one day challenge his rule, cursed her with barrenness. Heartbroken but determined, Nut sought the help of Thoth, the god of wisdom. Thoth, clever and cunning, gambled with the moon for extra light and won 5 additional days beyond the 360-day year. These 5 epigomenal days were hidden from Ra's calendar, allowing Nut to bear her children in secret. On the first day, Osiris was born. The second brought forth Horus the Elder, an early form of the falcon god. The third saw Seth's arrival, the fourth Isis, and the fifth Nephthys. These days became sacred, celebrated at the end of the Egyptian year as days of mystery and renewal. Osiris, as the firstborn and favorite, inherited rulership from Geb. His reign was peaceful and prosperous, but it also incited jealousy in Seth. This familial conflict would culminate in one of the central myths of Egyptian religion, the betrayal and murder of Osiris, the mourning and magical resurrection by Isis, and the eventual avenging of Osiris by their son Horus. All of this sprang from the divine family birthed by Geb and Nut. Even after the children matured and took on their divine roles, the influence of Geb and Nut lingered. In many texts, Geb is portrayed as the judge who passes on kingship and divine authority to Osiris, and through him to Horus. He is a symbol of continuity and ancestral right. Nut, meanwhile, became a symbol of cosmic protection. Her arms and legs often appear painted across coffin lids, enveloping the deceased in her eternal embrace. The divine family of Geb and Nut was not merely a mythological curiosity. They were an axis mundi, a spiritual center upon which the beliefs of the Egyptian world turned. Their myth explained the separation of heaven and earth, the origin of time, and the birth of divine order. In temples and tombs, art and literature, their presence reaffirmed the sacred balance of the cosmos. To the ancient Egyptians, these gods were not distant abstractions. They were woven into the fabric of reality, present in the sky above, the earth below, and the very rhythm of days. Their joys and sorrows and betrayals echoed in the lives of humans. And in understanding them, the people of Egypt saw reflections of themselves, familial bonds, struggles for power, cycles of loss and love, all within the drama of the gods. Geb and Nut, forever separated but forever in love, held the world together by their very being. Their children, both harmonious and conflicted, continued the legacy of divine drama and cosmic purpose. Through this sacred family, the Egyptians envisioned a world both awe-inspiring and intimately familiar, where the divine walked hand in hand with the mortal, and the heavens wept for the earth each time the sun set beyond the desert horizon. Osiris, the just king, ruler of the living and the dead, in the heart of the Nile Valley, where life depended on the steady rhythm of the river's flood and retreat, the ancient Egyptians looked to their gods not only for protection and wisdom, but also for justice and order. Among them stood Osiris, a god who transcended his own mythological death to become the divine embodiment of rebirth, eternal law, and righteous kingship. As the mythos goes, Osiris was not merely a symbol of the afterlife. He was once the king of the living, a just ruler whose reign was so fair and prosperous that it stirred envy in the heart of his brother Seth. Osiris's story, complex and layered, became a cornerstone of Egyptian belief and the model for every pharaoh who followed. Osiris ruled the earth in a time of golden peace. Under his governance, humanity was said to have flourished, learning the ways of agriculture, religion, and civil law. He taught people how to tend the fields, how to worship the gods, and how to live with moral integrity. His wife and queen, the powerful goddess Isis, stood by his side as his equal in wisdom and magic. Together, they nurtured civilization, transforming Egypt into a land of abundance and spiritual richness. Osiris's rule was one of Ma'at, the sacred concept of balance, order, and justice. To the Egyptians, Ma'at was not simply an ideal, it was the divine structure of the universe, and Osiris upheld it with both authority and compassion. But where there is light, shadows gather. Osiris's own brother Seth grew bitter and jealous of the peace and love Osiris inspired. Seth, god of storms, chaos, and violence, longed to dethrone his brother and seize the power for himself. The betrayal came during a grand feast held in Osiris's honor. Seth, feigning camaraderie, presented a beautiful ornate sarcophagus, promising to gift it to whomever fit inside perfectly. Osiris, trusting his brother, lay inside to test it. In a flash, Seth slammed the lid shut, sealed it with molten lead, and cast it into the Nile. The body of Osiris drifted far from Egypt, leaving his kingdom in mourning and his people in peril. The death of Osiris plunged the land into uncertainty. Without their king, the people grew fearful, and the natural order began to falter. Isis, determined and grief-stricken, set off on a desperate search to recover her husband's body. Her quest took her through thickets and marshes, across seas and borders, until she found the sarcophagus lodged in the trunk of a great tamarisk tree, which had grown around it in Byblos. Isis brought the body back to Egypt, hiding it in the papyrus reeds of the delta. But Seth, ever watchful, discovered it, and in a rage, tore the body into 14 pieces and scattered them across the land. In an act of divine will and magical brilliance, Isis embarked on a second, more arduous journey to gather the pieces of Osiris and restore him to wholeness. With the help of her sister Nephthys, the wise Thoth, and the jackal-headed Anubis, Isis reassembled the dismembered god. In the quiet of a sacred chamber, she performed the first mummification, wrapping his limbs in linen and chanting spells of reawakening. Osiris, though no longer fit to walk among the living, was resurrected in spirit. He descended into the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, and claimed his throne as ruler of the dead. From his seat in the Hall of Two Truths, Osiris presided over the judgment of souls. When a person died, their bulk, the soul, would journey through the perils of the underworld and come before Osiris. There, the heart of the deceased was weighed on the scales against the feather of Ma'at. Anubis conducted the weighing, while Thoth recorded the outcome, and Amit, the devourer, lurked hungrily nearby. If the heart was lighter than the feather, the soul passed into the field of reeds, a paradise of eternal contentment. If it was heavier, the heart was devoured and the soul was annihilated forever. This judgment was not just a posthumous ritual, it shaped how Egyptians lived. To the average person, the hope of eternal life depended not on wealth or birth, but on moral purity, on living a life in accordance with Ma'at. Osiris, in this way, became the conscience of the nation. He reminded Egyptians that justice and truth transcended mortality and that their deeds followed them beyond the grave. Osiris also symbolized the cyclical nature of life and death. Just as he had died and returned, so too did the crops rise and fall with the seasons. His body was Egypt itself, the black fertile soil, the growing grain, the life that sprang from the Nile. During festivals like the Koyak, effigies of Osiris were buried in ceremonial plots, sown with seeds to simulate his rebirth. These rituals did more than honor the dead. They ensured the renewal of the land and the survival of the people. Pharaohs, too, drew their legitimacy from Osiris. In life, the reigning king was considered the living Horus, son of Osiris. In death, he became Osiris himself. Thus, kingship in Egypt was not merely political, but deeply spiritual, rooted in myth and cosmic duty. Each pharaoh stood as a guardian of Ma'at, a vessel of divine authority, and an echo of the god who had once ruled wisely and died nobly. Art and architecture throughout Egypt paid homage to Osiris. In temple reliefs, he is depicted as a mummified figure with green skin, symbolizing life and resurrection, holding the crook and flail, the symbols of kingship and agricultural power. His crown, the Atef, combines Upper Egypt's white crown with ostrich feathers, reflecting his universal reach. Tomb walls were inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead, many addressed to Osiris, asking for protection and safe passage through the Duat. Even ordinary tombs contained small statues and paintings of Osiris, reminders that no matter one's station in life, the journey to the afterlife would pass through his court. These artistic tributes were not idle decorations. They were acts of devotion, pleas for mercy, and acknowledgments of an eternal truth. Osiris was the great equalizer. Whether pharaoh or farmer, merchant or mason, each soul would kneel before the god who had once walked the earth as a man. Thus, Osiris's legacy endured. He was more than a myth. He was a model for justice, a promise of life beyond death, and a guiding force for generations. His story, filled with sorrow and triumph, betrayal and restoration, taught that even in the face of chaos, order could be restored. That death was not the end, but the beginning of another realm, where the just would flourish and the wicked fade into nothingness. Through Osiris, the ancient Egyptians found hope, meaning, and a divine order in the mysteries of existence. Osiris, the just king, ruler of the living and the dead. Before there was death, there was Osiris, king of Egypt, bringer of civilization, and embodiment of justice. In the golden age of divine rule, Osiris reigned with wisdom and compassion, teaching humanity the arts of agriculture, governance, and reverence for the gods. He wore the white crown of Upper Egypt, held the crook and flail as symbols of leadership, and ruled beside his beloved sister wife, Isis. Together they shaped a kingdom of harmony and order, where the river Nile flowed in time with celestial rhythms and the people flourished under divine guidance. But not all welcomed this peace. Seth, Osiris's brother and the embodiment of chaos and violence, grew envious. Desiring the throne for himself, he hatched a cruel deception. At a feast, Seth presented a magnificent sarcophagus, promising it to whoever fit inside. When Osiris lay down, the lid slammed shut, and Seth sealed it with molten lead, casting it into the Nile. With the king lost to the depths, darkness crept across the land. Chaos rejoiced. Yet death could not silence Osiris. Guided by grief and devotion, Isis searched the world for her husband's body. She found the sarcophagus lodged in the roots of a foreign tamarisk tree, its wood grown tall around the divine remains. Isis returned the body to Egypt, hiding it deep within the marshes. But Seth discovered her secret and in a fury tore Osiris's body into 14 pieces, scattering them across the land. Isis, undaunted, transformed into a kite, a sacred bird, and with her sister Nephthys, combed the earth for every fragment. Wherever they found a piece, a shrine arose, making Egypt a land stitched with memory and holiness. Through sacred rites and powerful magic, Isis reassembled Osiris. To breathe life into him once more, she called upon Thoth, the scribe of the gods, and Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian of the dead. With whispered spells and careful embalming, they preserved his form, and Isis, with divine love, conceived a child, Horus, the Avenger. Though Osiris would never return to the world of the living, he rose anew as ruler of the dead. In the underworld, Duat, he built a kingdom of eternal order. Upon a throne of ebony and gold, he judged the souls of the departed, weighing their hearts against the feather of Ma'at. Just as he once ruled Egypt, he now governed the afterlife, offering the just eternal peace and the wicked oblivion. Depictions of Osiris reveal his transformation. No longer a vital living king, he is shown wrapped in white mummy cloth, his face serene, green skin to symbolize rebirth and vegetation. He wears the Atef crown, tall and plumed, flanked by ostrich feathers, and in his crossed arms he holds the crook and flail, symbols of care and discipline. Around him swirl the gods of judgment, Anubis, Thoth, and the 42 assessors who ensure that Ma'at is upheld in the afterlife. Osiris's myth is more than a tale of murder and mourning. It embodies the cycle of nature, the flooding and retreat of the Nile, the decay and return of crops, the passage from life to death and back again. Every year, Egyptians celebrated his resurrection during the festival of Koyak, reenacting the burial and revival of the god. Priests would mold small statues of Osiris from Nile mud and barley, watching them sprout to honor the god of rebirth. His legacy is imprinted upon every tomb and sarcophagus. Inscriptions invoke his name, calling upon his judgment and his promise that death is not the end, but a passage. In unison with Ra, who dies and is reborn with each setting and rising sun, Osiris guarantees continuity, justice, and the renewal of the soul. To be buried in the West, to lie beneath stars that never set, to have one's name spoken in rituals and remembrance, these were gifts Osiris bestowed upon the faithful. He was the final comfort, the just king in death as he had been in life. Through him, the Egyptians found purpose in mortality, believing that even the humblest soul might join him in the fields of reeds, where pain ceased and joy endured forever. The tragedy of Osiris, betrayal and murder by Seth. Long before the days when tombs rose like mountains and hieroglyphs whispered sacred spells across stone, the tale of Osiris unfolded, one of love, betrayal, and divine endurance. Osiris, the noble king of Egypt and first among gods to rule humanity, was a beacon of wisdom and peace. Under his reign, order flourished, crops grew in harmony with the flooding Nile, and laws guided all living things with fairness. He shared his throne with Isis, his devoted sister and queen, whose magical prowess and boundless love matched his sovereignty. Together they brought civilization from the wilderness, establishing a golden age on earth. But lurking in the shadows was Seth, Osiris's brother, fierce and chaotic, a force of storms, deserts, and disorder. Seth's heart simmered with jealousy as he watched Osiris earn the love of gods and men alike. To Seth, peace was stagnation, and admiration was fuel for resentment. He longed for the throne, for dominion over a world he would reshape through might and terror. The seed of treachery took root in his soul, and thus began one of the oldest and most heart-wrenching stories in Egyptian mythology. Under the guise of festivity, Seth plotted his coup. He crafted an ornate sarcophagus, its dimensions matching Osiris's form perfectly. At a grand banquet filled with wine, music, and feigned brotherly cheer, Seth unveiled the coffin and offered it as a prize to whomever could fit within. One by one, the guests tried and failed, until Osiris, amused and trusting, stepped inside. In an instant, the lid crashed down. Seth and his conspirators sealed the chest tight with molten lead and cast it into the dark waters of the Nile. Gasps turned to horror as the banquet descended into panic, and Seth declared himself ruler in the ensuing void. The river carried Osiris's body far from the land he loved. Isis, stricken with grief, shed royal duties and traveled alone across distant lands in search of her husband. Her heart, filled with despair and resolve, guided her to Byblos, where the sarcophagus had lodged itself within the roots of a tamarisk tree. The tree had grown tall, embracing the coffin within its trunk, becoming a pillar in the foreign king's palace. Isis, disguised and humble, won favor at court and reclaimed the coffin through cunning and divine magic. She returned with it to Egypt, hiding it in the marshes of the Delta, but her triumph was short-lived. Seth discovered the hiding place. Enraged by her success, he tore open the coffin, retrieved Osiris's body, and hacked it into 14 pieces. These fragments he scattered across Egypt, casting each part into a different region so the king could never be whole again. Chaos, once banished from the land, spread once more, infecting hearts with fear. But Isis refused to surrender to despair. She became a bird, a kite, whose mournful cries echoed across the reeds. With the help of her sister Nephthys, Thoth the scribe, and Anubis the embalmer, she retrieved each part of Osiris, traveling from shrine to shrine, gathering what was lost. Each discovery became a sacred place, and in reassembling the god, Isis created a map of holiness etched across Egypt. Through ritual and love, Osiris was made whole. His soul returned, not to the land of the living, but to a new throne in Duat, the underworld. There he ruled over the dead with the same justice he had shown the living. He became the judge of souls, weighing hearts against the feather of Ma'at. The tragedy of his murder became the foundation of rebirth, his death a gateway to eternity. The myth reverberated across generations. Pharaohs saw themselves as living Osirises, destined to die and resurrect as divine beings. Tombs bore the images of Osiris, wrapped in white, green-skinned with the crook and flail across his chest. His story was carved into temple walls, whispered in night-long funerary rites, and reenacted in the festival of Koyak when priests buried effigies in silt and grain, watching life sprout from death. The betrayal of Osiris is not just a story of fratricide. It is the ancient Egyptian understanding of mortality, grief, and hope. Seth's treachery, while brutal, served a cosmic purpose. It opened the gates to the afterlife. It taught humanity that even in death, a kind of justice and peace could prevail. Osiris did not seek revenge. Instead, his legacy continued through his son, Horus, the falcon-eyed avenger, who would one day challenge Seth for the throne of the living. In the tragedy of Osiris lies a profound truth. That order, once broken, can be restored, not by rage, but through perseverance, love, and remembrance. And so long as the Nile flows and the stars cross the sky in their nightly arcs, Osiris reigns in the west, eternal and just, the silent promise that death is but another kind of life. Isis the sorceress, queen, mother, and seeker of life. In the vast shimmering landscape of ancient Egypt, among the pantheon of gods and goddesses who shape the fate of mortals and immortals alike, Isis stands as one of the most beloved and enduring figures. She is a goddess who embodies mystery, power, love, and devotion. A sorceress whose magic defied even death itself. Revered as queen of the gods, devoted mother, and relentless seeker of life, Isis's story is woven into the very fabric of Egyptian belief, culture, and everyday life. Her myth is a lullaby to the ancient Egyptian soul, a whisper of hope in the face of loss, and a powerful reminder of the strength found in love and loyalty. The origins and nature of Isis. Isis, known in Egyptian as Aset or Iset, emerged from the earliest layers of Egyptian mythology. She was a member of the Ennead of Heliopolis, a group of 9 primordial deities who governed creation and cosmic order. Born to the sky god Geb and the earth goddess Nut, Isis was the sister and consort of Osiris, the god of the afterlife and resurrection, and sister of Seth, the god of chaos. Unlike many gods who ruled over single domains, Isis was multifaceted. She was a goddess of fertility, motherhood, magic, wisdom, and healing. She was often depicted wearing a throne-shaped crown atop her head, symbolizing her role as the rightful queen of Egypt. This throne iconography also reinforced the belief that she was the divine mother of pharaohs, the living kings on earth, linking royal power directly to divine favor. Her influence stretched far beyond the religious. Isis became a symbol of protective motherhood and was worshipped by women seeking fertility, safe childbirth, and the well-being of their children. Her compassionate nature made her one of the most approachable and empathetic gods in the Egyptian pantheon, offering comfort and guidance to those who called upon her. The queen's tragedy, the death of Osiris. Isis's story is inseparable from the tragic fate of her husband and brother, Osiris. Their love was pure and strong, the divine ideal of partnership and harmony. But their happiness was shattered by the jealous fury of Seth, whose ambition to seize the throne led him to orchestrate Osiris's murder. When Osiris was cruelly slain and his body scattered across Egypt, Isis was devastated. However, her grief was not passive. With unwavering determination, she transformed from a grieving widow into a relentless seeker of life and resurrection. Her story became one of courage and magical power, a journey to reclaim what death had taken. Isis's quest took her across the length and breadth of Egypt. She searched tirelessly for every fragment of Osiris's broken body, guided by the magic that pulsed through her veins. Where others might have given up, Isis's love propelled her forward, fueled by the hope that life could triumph over death. The sorceress's magic, a power beyond mortal limits. Isis's magic was unlike that of any other deity. She was the master of spells and incantations, the keeper of secret knowledge handed down from the gods themselves. This magical prowess was central to her identity, and the reason she was often called upon to protect the weak, heal the sick, and overcome seemingly impossible odds. Ancient texts portray Isis weaving her spells with the words of power she whispered to the winds and waters. She commanded the elements, summoned the spirits, and bent the laws of nature. Most famously, it was her magic that reassembled Osiris's body and breathed new life into him, allowing him to become lord of the underworld rather than remaining a lost soul. Isis's magic also extended to her role as a mother. She used her powers to protect her son, Horus, from Set's threats and to ensure his survival against overwhelming odds. Her fierce protection and magical skill helped shape Horus into the rightful heir, destined to reclaim his father's throne and restore order to Egypt. The Divine Mother. Raising Horus. Isis's motherhood was a defining aspect of her divinity. Her son Horus, often depicted as a falcon-headed god, was not just a child but a symbol of kingship and renewal. Isis's role as mother was both nurturing and martial. She shielded Horus from danger, nurtured his growth, and prepared him to fulfill his destiny. The myth recounts how Isis raised Horus in secrecy, hidden away from the watchful eyes of Set and his minions. She took him to remote places, from marshlands to deserts, where she cared for him and taught him to harness his divine powers. Her devotion ensured that Horus survived the trials of childhood and grew into a strong and just ruler. Through Horus, Isis's maternal influence extended to all of Egypt. The pharaohs claimed descent from Horus, and by extension, protection and blessing from Isis herself. She was seen as the ultimate protector of the monarchy and the embodiment of the ideal mother and queen. Isis as a universal goddess, worship and influence. Isis's appeal was not confined to Egypt. Her cult spread across the ancient Mediterranean world, becoming one of the most widespread and enduring religious movements of antiquity. From Greece to Rome and beyond, Isis was venerated as a goddess who transcended national boundaries and cultural differences. Her temples became centers of healing, magic, and mystery. Pilgrims traveled great distances to seek her favor, hoping to receive blessings of fertility, protection, and wisdom. The rituals dedicated to Isis often involved songs, dances, and elaborate ceremonies that celebrated her powers as a mother and magician. One of the most famous temples dedicated to Isis was located on the island of Philae, near the Nile's first cataract. Here, priests performed sacred rites that reenacted the myth of Osiris's death and resurrection, allowing worshippers to participate in the cosmic drama of life, death, and rebirth. The symbolism of Isis, from throne to wings. Isis's iconography is rich with symbolism. She is often portrayed with a throne-shaped crown, signifying her role as queen and mother of kings. Sometimes she is shown with outstretched wings, symbolizing protection and the ability to shelter those who seek refuge under her care. Her image with wings also connects her to the concept of the soul's journey after death. Isis was believed to guide the souls of the dead safely to the afterlife, offering comfort to those passing through the mysteries of death. Her association with the Ankh, the symbol of life, further emphasizes her role as a goddess who sustains and renews existence. The Ankh was frequently depicted in her hands, a powerful emblem of eternal life and divine energy. Isis in daily life, magic and medicine. In the daily lives of ancient Egyptians, Isis was a figure of hope and healing. Mothers prayed to her for safe childbirth and protection of their children. Healers and magicians invoked her name in spells to cure illness and drive away evil spirits. Her name was inscribed on amulets, charms, and papyrus scrolls used for protection and blessing. In times of trouble, Isis's magic was a beacon of light, a reminder that even the darkest night would give way to dawn. Her magical legacy influenced not only religious practices, but also the broader culture of magic in Egypt, which blended religion with practical knowledge of herbs, medicine, and ritual. The eternal seeker, Isis's enduring quest. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Isis is her eternal quest for life, a quest that transcends death and destruction. Her search for Osiris and her efforts to raise Horus symbolize the universal human struggle against loss and the desire to protect what is precious. Isis's story is a powerful metaphor for resilience, love, and hope. In a world where death was ever present and often harsh, Isis offered a vision of possibility, that love could conquer death, that life could be reborn, and that magic, both divine and human, could change fate. This message gave comfort to the Egyptians and has continued to resonate through the centuries, inspiring countless stories, artworks, and spiritual traditions. In the quiet desert nights, under the vast Egyptian sky, Isis's story whispers like a timeless lullaby. She is a goddess of many faces, queen, mother, sorceress, healer, and protector. Her magic defies death, her love transcends loss. To the ancient Egyptians, Isis was a source of power and comfort, a divine presence guiding souls through the mysteries of life and death. For us today, her myth reminds us of the eternal cycles that govern existence, the strength found in love and perseverance, and the enduring hope that no darkness lasts forever. Isis teaches us that even in the face of great sorrow, the quest for life, healing, and renewal never truly ends. Anubis and the art of embalming, guardian of the dead. In the shadowy realm between life and the afterlife, the ancient Egyptians believed there was a protector, a guide, and a master of sacred rites who watched over the passage of souls. This deity was Anubis, the jackal-headed god, whose solemn duty was to guard the dead and ensure their safe journey through the underworld. His domain was the art of embalming, a complex and vital process that preserved the body for eternity, and the rituals that maintained cosmic order by honoring the dead. Anubis was the solemn face of death, not feared but deeply respected, and his presence was woven into the very fabric of Egyptian funerary customs. The origins and identity of Anubis. Anubis, known in ancient Egyptian as Anpu or Inpu, stands out among the gods as a figure uniquely connected with death's mysteries. Unlike other deities associated with death, such as Osiris who ruled the afterlife, Anubis was the god of embalming and the protector of graves. His image was instantly recognizable, a man with the sleek black head of a jackal or dog, animals commonly seen prowling around cemeteries. The color black was not a symbol of death in the Egyptian sense, but rather one of fertility, rebirth, and the rich soil of the Nile Valley. This was fitting for Anubis, who was both a guardian and a symbol of resurrection. The jackal, an animal known for scavenging near burial sites, became a natural emblem of his role, blending fear and reverence in equal measure. Anubis's parentage varies in different myths. In some traditions, he is the son of Nephthys and Osiris, while in others, he is the child of Nephthys and Seth. Regardless of his origin, Anubis was deeply connected to Osiris's story, acting as the vigilant guardian who ensured that Osiris's resurrection and reign as Lord of the Afterlife remained unchallenged. The sacred role of embalming. One of Anubis's most crucial roles was overseeing the ancient Egyptian practice of embalming, a meticulous process designed to preserve the body so the soul could live on after death. The Egyptians believed that death was not an end but a transformation, that the soul, or Ka, needed a preserved body as a home in the afterlife. Embalming was a sacred art, and it required skill, knowledge, and ritual precision. Priests who performed the mummification rites acted in the name of Anubis, invoking his guidance to protect the body and spirit. This process was lengthy, often taking up to 70 days, and involved removing the internal organs, drying the body with natron salts, wrapping it carefully in linen bandages, and anointing it with oils and resins. Anubis was often depicted in tomb paintings and funerary texts overseeing these rites. His image was sometimes carved or painted on coffins and sarcophagi, a symbol of his protective presence. He was the divine embalmer, ensuring that the body was treated with reverence and that the soul's journey could proceed unhindered. The weighing of the heart, Anubis as judge and guide. Anubis's role extended beyond embalming to the spiritual judgment of the dead. In the Hall of Ma'at, where the souls of the departed faced the test of truth and justice, Anubis appeared as a guardian and guide. The ancient Egyptians believed that after death, the heart of the deceased was weighed on a scale against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic order. Anubis presided over this critical moment. His task was to carefully balance the scales and ensure fairness in judgment. If the heart was lighter than the feather, it meant the soul was pure and worthy of entering the eternal afterlife. But if it was heavy with sin, it was devoured by Ammit, the fearsome devourer who consumed the wicked, condemning them to oblivion. This role made Anubis both a protector and a stern enforcer of moral order. He was the guide who helped souls navigate the uncertain passage from mortality to eternity. His presence reassured the living that justice would prevail beyond death and that order would be maintained in the universe. Anubis in funerary art and symbolism. Throughout ancient Egyptian tombs and temples, the figure of Anubis appears repeatedly, symbolizing protection and safe passage. Painted in vivid detail on the walls of tombs, his image was meant to guard the deceased from evil spirits, thieves, and any harm that might disturb the eternal rest. His jackal form, sleek and alert, often appears crouched protectively over coffins or mummies, a silent sentinel. Amulets and funerary statuettes bearing his likeness were placed with the dead to invoke his power. Anubis's iconography includes the flail and scepter, symbols of authority and protection. Sometimes he is shown holding the crook and flail, tools associated with kingship and divine guardianship, emphasizing his sacred duty. The rituals and prayers to Anubis. Priests performing embalming rites chanted prayers and incantations to Anubis, calling upon him to bless the body and guard the soul. The opening of the mouth ceremony, a crucial ritual, was performed to restore the senses and abilities of the deceased so they could breathe, speak, and eat in the afterlife. Anubis was often invoked in this rite as the master of life-giving magic. These rituals were not merely technical but deeply spiritual, reflecting the Egyptians' profound respect for death and the afterlife. Anubis's name was uttered in hushed tones, with offerings of incense, food, and drink made to honor his power. The priests wore masks or headdresses resembling Anubis's jackal head during ceremonies, embodying the god's presence and channeling his protective energy. This practice reinforced the belief that the divine was near, guiding the transition from this world to the next. Anubis beyond Egypt, influence and legacy. Anubis's influence extended far beyond the boundaries of Egypt. During the Hellenistic period, when Egyptian culture mingled with Greek traditions, Anubis was identified with the Greek god Hermes, becoming Hermanubis, a hybrid deity who guided souls in the underworld. His role as a psychopomp, a guide of souls, resonated with cultures beyond Egypt's borders, contributing to the god's lasting legacy. Statues and inscriptions dedicated to Anubis have been found in various parts of the ancient world, attesting to the widespread reverence he inspired. Even today, Anubis's image endures in popular culture, art, and literature, symbolizing the mysterious boundary between life and death. and the timeless human fascination with what lies beyond. Anubis and the everyday Egyptian. For the common Egyptian, Anubis was more than a distant god. He was a comforting presence in the face of death's uncertainties. Families would invoke Anubis's protection when preparing for funerals, hoping to secure a peaceful afterlife for their loved ones. Tombs were sealed with his image to guard against desecration, and his name was carved on stela and grave markers as a talisman. The art of embalming itself was a gift from Anubis, a sacred practice that allowed Egyptians to believe that death was only a doorway to a new existence. In a culture where the afterlife was paramount, Anubis's role was vital. His solemn visage reminded everyone that death was part of the cycle, and with proper care and rituals, life could continue beyond the grave. The mystery of Anubis, jackal, or man? The choice of the jackal as Anubis's symbol invites curiosity. Why a scavenger animal associated with cemeteries? The answer lies in the ancient Egyptians' keen observation of nature and their desire to impose divine order on the chaotic forces around them. Jackals were often seen at dusk, prowling near burial grounds, animals connected to death but also to the protection of sacred places. By adopting the jackal as his form, Anubis embodied the boundary between life and death, a guardian who watched over the dead and kept chaos at bay. His half-man, half-jackal form symbolized the intersection of the human and divine, the mortal and immortal realms. This duality made Anubis a powerful figure who could navigate between worlds, a protector who understood both earthly life and the mysteries beyond. Anubis's place in the Egyptian pantheon. While Osiris was the ultimate ruler of the afterlife, Anubis's role was no less important. He was the guardian who prepared the dead for Osiris's judgment, the embalmer who preserved the body, and the guide who ensured that souls were judged fairly. Together, Osiris and Anubis maintained the balance between life, death, and resurrection. This balance was central to Egyptian cosmology, which depended on the harmony of opposing forces, order and chaos, life and death, light and darkness. Anubis's steady presence and solemn duty underscored the Egyptian belief that death was not to be feared, but respected and understood as part of the divine order. Horus the Avenger, the Eye of Justice opens. In the vast tapestry of Egyptian mythology, where gods wove the fates of mortals and immortals alike, one figure stands out as the fierce embodiment of justice, protection, and vengeance. Horus. Often depicted as a falcon-headed god, Horus was not merely a symbol of kingship in the sky. He was the relentless avenger, the divine warrior whose very eye was a beacon of justice. His story unfolds as a cosmic battle between order and chaos, light and darkness, a drama that shaped the destiny of Egypt and the eternal struggle between good and evil. The birth of Horus, the son of Osiris and Isis. Horus was born into tragedy and turmoil. His father Osiris had been murdered and dismembered by his jealous brother Seth, the god of chaos and destruction. Osiris's sister and wife, Isis, used all her magical knowledge to restore Osiris to life, if only briefly, and conceive Horus. From the moment of his birth, Horus was destined to challenge Seth, to reclaim his father's throne, and to restore balance to Egypt. Horus's birth was no ordinary event. Conceived through Isis's powerful magic, he was a child of both divine resurrection and cosmic necessity. His very existence was a symbol of hope amid despair, a promise that justice would be served. Horus as the sky god and protector. Horus is often depicted with the head of a falcon, wings spread wide across the sky. As the god of the sky, his right eye was associated with the sun, shining with the fiery light of day, while his left eye represented the moon, casting a cooler glow at night. These eyes were not merely celestial bodies but powerful symbols. The eye of Horus represented protection, royal power, and good health. The eye of Horus was a potent amulet worn by Egyptians to guard against evil and harm. It was believed to possess healing powers and the ability to ward off danger, embodying the divine vigilance of Horus himself. For pharaohs, Horus was the ultimate protector, the divine model for kingship, and the guarantor of their rule. The cosmic battle, Horus versus Seth. The heart of Horus's myth is his epic struggle against Seth, his uncle and rival. After Osiris's murder, Seth usurped the throne of Egypt, plunging the land into chaos. Horus grew up to challenge Guruk, set in a series of fierce battles that lasted for years, representing the eternal conflict between order, Ma'at, and disorder. These battles were not mere physical fights, but symbolic clashes embodying deep cosmic truths. Horus, the Avenger, stood for rightful rule, justice, and the restoration of harmony. Set, the chaotic force, sought to disrupt the natural order and impose his will through violence and deceit. The myths recount how Horus and Set fought over the kingship of Egypt, each trying to prove their legitimacy. Their conflicts included transformations, cunning tricks, and even interventions by other gods. At times, Horus was wounded, his eye injured or lost, yet he always recovered through the intervention of the goddess Hathor or Thoth, the god of wisdom. The Eye of Horus, symbol of healing and protection. One of the most famous elements of Horus's story is the injury and restoration of his eye. In a fierce battle with Set, Horus's left eye was torn out, symbolizing a great sacrifice and suffering. However, through divine magic and healing, the eye was restored, becoming the Wadjet, a symbol of protection, royal authority, and healing power. The Eye of Horus was used extensively in Egyptian art, jewelry, and amulets. It was believed to provide safety in both life and death, guarding the wearer from evil spirits and illness. The eye's 6 parts also represented the 6 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch, and thought, reinforcing its role as a symbol of wholeness and health. In funerary practices, the Eye of Horus was painted on coffins and tombs, protecting the deceased in the afterlife and ensuring a safe passage to eternity. Horus as the divine king, the model of pharaohs. Horus's connection to kingship was central to ancient Egyptian culture. Pharaohs were considered the living incarnation of Horus on earth, the rightful heirs to Osiris's throne and the defenders of Ma'at. The coronation of a new king was a sacred event that symbolized Horus's victory over chaos and the continuation of divine order. The pharaoh's role was to maintain harmony, justice, and prosperity in the land, the very principles Horus embodied. Statues and reliefs depicted the king with the falcon-headed god, emphasizing the divine protection and authority granted to the ruler. This divine kingship was not just political, but deeply religious. The pharaoh was the earthly guarantor of cosmic balance, and Horus's myth legitimized his power. By associating themselves with Horus, Egyptian rulers claimed divine sanction and the right to rule over Egypt. The cult of Horus, temples and worship. Horus was worshipped throughout Egypt, with numerous temples dedicated to his honor. One of the most famous was the temple at Edfu, built during the Ptolemaic period, which stands as one of the best preserved ancient Egyptian temples today. The temple celebrated Horus as the victorious god and the protector of the kingdom. Daily rituals involved offerings, prayers, and festivals celebrating Horus's power and protection. Priests acted as intermediaries between the god and the people, performing ceremonies to invoke Horus's blessing and ensure the pharaoh's success. Horus was also worshipped as a god of war and hunting, reinforcing his image as a fierce warrior. His falcon form was associated with keen eyesight, swift flight, and deadly precision, all qualities prized by the Egyptians and their rulers and protectors. Horus and the afterlife. While Osiris was the ruler of the underworld and the judge of the dead, Horus played a vital role in funerary beliefs. He was seen as a guide and protector for the deceased, helping to secure their passage to the afterlife and their resurrection. In funerary texts, Horus appears as a guardian of tombs and a defender against evil forces. His presence ensured that the soul of the departed would not be harmed by demons or malevolent spirits. The Eye of Horus, painted on coffins or amulets, was a key symbol of this protection. The mythology also suggests that Horus and Osiris worked together in the afterlife, Horus as the living king and Osiris as the dead king. This duality reflected the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth central to Egyptian religion. The symbolism of Horus in daily life. For ordinary Egyptians, Horus was a symbol of protection and justice. His image adorned homes, jewelry, and amulets to guard against harm. The Eye of Horus was especially popular among soldiers and travelers, believed to shield them from danger and misfortune. The story of Horus's victory over Set was a reminder that chaos and evil could be overcome by courage, justice, and divine intervention. It reinforced social order and moral values, teaching that wrongdoers would be punished and that truth and righteousness would ultimately prevail. Horus's association with the sky also linked him to the natural world, the sun, the moon, and the stars. making him a god who connected the heavens with the earth. His soaring falcon was a symbol of freedom, vision, and power. Horus's influence beyond Egypt. The worship of Horus influenced cultures beyond Egypt's borders. His image and symbolism found their way into Mediterranean and Near Eastern art and religion, where the falcon or hawk often appeared as a symbol of divine kingship and protection. In Greco-Roman Egypt, Horus was sometimes merged with other gods, continuing his legacy as a powerful protector and warrior. His mythology inspired later stories of divine avengers and heroic figures. Today, Horus remains one of the most recognizable figures of ancient Egyptian mythology, a symbol of justice, strength, and the eternal fight against chaos. The battle for the throne, Horus versus Seth. In the ancient Egyptian world, where gods ruled not only the heavens but also the fate of mortals, the story of Horus and Seth's battle for the throne of Egypt stands out as one of the most dramatic and enduring myths. This epic conflict was not just a quarrel between two gods, but a cosmic struggle representing order versus chaos, legitimacy versus usurpation, light battling darkness. It is a tale filled with cunning, violence, divine arbitration, and ultimate restoration. A story that defined the ancient Egyptian understanding of justice, kingship, and balance. Setting the stage, the death of Osiris and the chaos left behind. To truly understand the battle between Horus and Seth, we must first revisit the tragic death of Osiris, the beloved king and god of the afterlife. Osiris was murdered by his jealous brother Seth, who coveted the throne and sought to disrupt the divine order. Seth's act plunged Egypt into darkness and chaos. Ma'at, the principle of cosmic order and harmony, was shattered. After Osiris's death, his wife and sister Isis performed magical rites to resurrect Osiris long enough to conceive their son Horus. Horus grew up with a destiny set before him, to reclaim his father's throne and restore balance to Egypt. But Seth was not willing to relinquish his stolen crown easily. The nature of the conflict, more than a physical battle. The battle between Horus and Seth was not simply a matter of brute force. It was a complex series of contests, both physical and magical, testing strength, wisdom, and legitimacy. The gods themselves became judges and arbiters of this divine struggle, which took place over many years and in many forms. Unlike many myths that describe single climactic fights, this story unfolds as a prolonged saga. It involved contests of shape-shifting, trials of cunning, fierce battles, and legal disputes in the divine court. It was a multifaceted war fought not only with weapons, but also with magic, persuasion, and strategy. The shape-shifting contest. One of the most famous episodes involves Horus and Seth's ability to transform themselves into various animals and elements. The gods often changed shapes to outwit or harm one another. At one point, both transformed into hippopotamuses, fierce and dangerous creatures symbolizing chaos and strength in Egyptian mythology. They clashed violently in the waters, each trying to dominate the other. In another tale, they changed into a variety of birds and beasts, each trying to gain the upper hand. These transformations were more than mere tricks. They symbolized the fluidity of identity and power, and the ability to adapt and survive in a world ruled by divine will. The battle of wits and the role of Isis. Isis, ever the devoted mother and sorceress, played a crucial role in this conflict. She used her magic and cunning to protect Horus and help him gain advantages over Seth. For example, Isis created magical barriers and potions to heal Horus's wounds after his battles. At one point, Horus was blinded during a fight with Seth, but Isis's magic restored his sight. Her interventions were vital in ensuring Horus's survival and eventual victory. She also tried to trick Seth and influence the gods who were judging the conflict, demonstrating that this battle was not only physical but political and magical, the divine court and the judgment of the gods. As the battle continued, the gods decided to intervene to resolve the dispute. They convened a divine court, a celestial tribunal to hear the claims of both Horus and Seth. The court was presided over by powerful deities such as Ra, the sun god and supreme ruler, and Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing. Both Horus and Seth presented their cases, each claiming the right to rule Egypt. Horus argued that he was the rightful heir as Osiris's son, and Seth maintained that his strength and control over the land justified his kingship. The court's deliberations were long and fraught with tension. The gods tested both contenders, assessing their character, strength, and adherence to Ma'at. The divine court was a reflection of the Egyptian legal system and the importance placed on justice, fairness, and balance, the role of violence and trickery. The contest was brutal at times. In one version of the myth, Seth tries to humiliate Horus by attacking him in a most shameful way, but Horus responds cleverly, exposing Seth's misdeeds before the gods. This episode is often interpreted as a story about justice prevailing over treachery and chaos. Throughout their battles, both gods employed violence, cunning, and sometimes questionable tactics, reflecting the messy and complex nature of power struggles. These stories remind us that ancient Egyptian mythology acknowledged that the path to justice and order was not always straightforward or clean. Horus's eye and the symbol of restoration. One of the most important symbols arising from this conflict is the Eye of Horus. During the battles, Horus lost his eye, which was then magically restored by Thoth. This restoration was a powerful metaphor for healing, protection, and wholeness. The Eye of Horus became an enduring symbol in Egyptian culture, representing not just physical health but also the triumph of order over chaos. It was used in amulets and rituals to protect the living and the dead. The final verdict and the restoration of order. After many trials and battles, the gods finally ruled in favor of Horus. He was declared the rightful king of Egypt, the legitimate heir to Osiris's throne. Seth was either banished or given control over the desert, symbolizing chaos confined to the edges of civilization. Horus's victory restored Ma'at, the divine order that kept the universe in balance. This mythic event was central to Egyptian kingship, as every pharaoh was seen as the living Horus, the protector and maintainer of Ma'at. The political and religious significance. The myth of Horus versus Seth was not just a story told around campfires. It was a foundational narrative with deep political and religious significance. Pharaohs used this myth to legitimize their rule, portraying themselves as Horus incarnate, upholding justice, and protecting Egypt from chaos. Temples dedicated to Horus often depicted scenes from this struggle, emphasizing the divine right of kingship and the eternal fight between order and disorder. The myth reinforced the belief that the pharaoh was more than a ruler. He was the cosmic guarantor of balance and justice. The legacy of the myth. The story of Horus and Seth has endured for thousands of years, inspiring art, literature, and religious practice. It represents universal themes of justice, legitimacy, and the struggle between good and evil. For ancient Egyptians, this myth was a comforting reminder that despite the dangers and uncertainties of life, order would ultimately triumph. It was a story of hope, resilience, and the divine assurance that justice would prevail. The Eye of Horus, protection, healing, and power. In the vast and intricate world of Egyptian mythology, few symbols have endured with as much significance and mystique as the Eye of Horus. Known also as the Wadjet, this powerful emblem was much more than a mere decoration. It was a symbol of divine protection, healing, and authority that permeated daily life, religion, and even the afterlife. Understanding the Eye of Horus reveals much about ancient Egyptian beliefs on health, safety, and cosmic balance, as well as the ways myth and magic intertwined in their culture. The origins of the Eye of Horus. The Eye of Horus arises directly from the mythic battle between Horus and Seth, the violent contest for the throne of Egypt. During one of their fierce encounters, Horus lost his left eye, often called the Wadjet Eye, after the goddess Wadjet, who was associated with protection and royalty. This eye was gouged out or damaged in some versions of the myth, symbolizing the wounds and sacrifices Horus endured in his struggle to restore order after the chaos wrought by Seth's treachery. However, Horus's eye was miraculously restored by Thoth, the god of wisdom, magic, and writing. Thoth's healing of the eye symbolized not just the restoration of physical sight, but also the return of harmony and balance, the restoration of Ma'at, the principle of order that underpinned the universe. From this myth, the Eye of Horus became a potent symbol of healing and regeneration. Symbolism embedded in the eye. The Eye of Horus is not merely an eye. It is a complex symbol packed with layers of meaning. Visually, it resembles a human eye, but with distinct markings that correspond to the facial features of a falcon, Horus's sacred animal. The markings around the eye resemble the facial stripes of a falcon, emphasizing Horus's identity and connection to the sky. Ancient Egyptians also saw the eye as a symbol of protection against evil forces. It was believed to guard the wearer from harm, envy, and malevolent spirits. This protective function made the Eye of Horus a ubiquitous symbol found on amulets, jewelry, and even funerary equipment, designed to safeguard the dead on their journey through the afterlife. The eye and fractions, a mathematical mystery. One fascinating aspect of the Eye of Horus is its connection to Egyptian mathematics and measurement. The symbol was divided into 6 parts, each representing a different fraction: 1/2, 1/4, 1/8, 1/16, 1/30 Seth, and 1/64. These fractions were linked to the parts of the eye and were used in ancient Egyptian measurements, particularly for measuring ingredients in medicine and offerings. This connection between myth and practical knowledge illustrates how deeply the Egyptians integrated their religious beliefs into everyday life. The eye was not just a mystical symbol, but a practical tool for order and balance, essential in rituals and medicine. Protective amulets and everyday use. Amulets bearing the Eye of Horus were worn by both the living and the dead. For the living, these amulets served as talismans to protect against injury, illness, and evil spells. Soldiers, children, and travelers often wore the eye for protection during dangerous journeys or battles. For the dead, the eye was placed in tombs and on burial shrouds to protect the deceased in the perilous journey through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. It was believed that the eye's protective power would help guide the soul safely through darkness and danger to reach the afterlife. The eye was also painted on boats and chariots, symbolically watching over those who traveled on the Nile and on land. Its protective gaze was thought to keep evil at bay and ensure safe passage. The Eye of Horus in healing and medicine. The eye's association with healing stemmed from the myth of its restoration. Ancient Egyptians saw the eye as a symbol of health and rejuvenation. Priests and physicians invoked the Eye of Horus in spells and rituals to cure diseases and injuries. Medical papyri from ancient Egypt often contain references to the Eye of Horus in healing charms and prescriptions. It was used as a powerful magical tool alongside herbal remedies. This intertwining of magic and medicine was common in Egyptian healing practices, where science and spirituality worked hand in hand. Healing rituals involved reciting spells that called upon Horus's power to restore wholeness and vitality. The eye was visualized as a source of divine energy capable of mending wounds, curing blindness, and protecting the body from harm. The eye as a symbol of royal power. Beyond its protective and healing functions, the Eye of Horus was also a signifier of royal authority. Since the pharaoh was seen as the living embodiment of Horus on earth, the eye became a symbol of the king's divine right to rule and his role as protector of Egypt. Pharaohs used the eye in their regalia and official iconography to reinforce their legitimacy and power. It symbolized their ability to see all, both literally and metaphorically, as guardians of order and justice. Temples and monuments often featured the Eye of Horus in reliefs and paintings, connecting the king's rule to the mythic struggle between Horus and Seth, and emphasizing the restoration of Ma'at through royal authority. The eye in funerary contexts and the afterlife. The Egyptian conception of the afterlife was complex and fraught with dangers for the deceased soul. To safely navigate this realm, protection was essential, and the Eye of Horus played a crucial role in funerary rites. It was common for the eye to be painted on coffins, mummy wrappings, and tomb walls as a magical safeguard. The protective gaze of Horus was thought to watch over the dead, ensuring their safe passage and eventual resurrection. In some beliefs, the eye itself was a kind of spiritual guardian, a luminous force that would dispel darkness and ward off evil creatures encountered in the underworld. The Eye of Horus in daily life and popular culture. The power of the eye extended beyond temples and tombs, influencing daily Egyptian life. Artisans, farmers, and common people embraced the symbol as a charm against misfortune and as a blessing for good health. Even today, the Eye of Horus is a widely recognized symbol, appearing in jewelry, tattoos, and popular media. It represents a timeless connection to ancient Egyptian wisdom about protection, healing, and spiritual insight. The eye invites reflection on how humans have long sought to understand and safeguard their place in an unpredictable world through symbols, stories, and rituals that bridge the seen and unseen of the eye. At its core, the Eye of Horus is about vision, not just physical sight, but insight, awareness, and the power to perceive truth. It symbolizes the human desire to see beyond surface appearances, to discern order amidst chaos, and to find healing where there is brokenness. For the ancient Egyptians, the eye was a beacon of hope and a source of divine energy, reminding them of the eternal struggle between light and darkness, health and illness, order and disorder. It was a reminder that even when broken or wounded, restoration and wholeness are possible. The Judgment Hall, weighing the heart in the afterlife. In the realm of ancient Egyptian belief, death was not the end, but a gateway to a complex journey through the afterlife, a realm fraught with peril, hope, and ultimate reckoning. Central to this journey was the Hall of Judgment, a cosmic courtroom presided over by Osiris, the god of the dead and resurrection. Here, the soul of the deceased faced its most critical test, the weighing of the heart, a divine trial that determined whether the individual would be granted eternal life or condemned to oblivion. Understanding this judgment hall is essential to grasping the Egyptian worldview, a culture deeply concerned with morality, cosmic balance, and the afterlife's spiritual realities. It reveals a civilization that, while harsh and unforgiving in some aspects of daily life, nurtured profound hopes for justice, order, and renewal beyond death. The journey to the Hall of Judgment. After death, the soul, known as the Ka and Ba, among other components, embarked on a perilous voyage through the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. This dark and mysterious realm was filled with dangers, monsters, and tests designed to weed out the unworthy. The soul needed protection, knowledge, and magical assistance to survive this journey. Funerary texts like the Book of the Dead, a collection of spells and instructions, served as guides for the deceased, offering the necessary spells to overcome threats and reach the Hall of Judgment intact. Eventually, after passing through many trials, the soul arrived at the Hall of Two Truths, a divine court where the deceased's worthiness would be decided. The divine judges and the setting. The Hall of Judgment was ruled by Osiris, the god of the dead and resurrection, who sat on a throne adorned with symbols of eternal life. Osiris was often depicted as a mummified figure, wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt and holding the crook and flail, symbols of kingship and power. Around him were various other deities acting as judges and witnesses, including Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming and protector of graves, who played a crucial role in the weighing process. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing, recorded the results with impartial accuracy. The hall itself was imagined as a grand, solemn chamber where cosmic order was upheld and divine justice was administered. The weighing of the heart. At the center of the judgment hall was the balance scale, the instrument upon which the heart of the deceased was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth, justice, and cosmic order. The heart, in Egyptian belief, was not merely a physical organ, but the seat of the soul, emotion, thought, and conscience. It was the essence of a person's moral character and life deeds. Ma'at's feather represented absolute truth and righteousness. The weighing symbolized the soul's alignment with Ma'at's principles. Had the individual lived a life of honesty, fairness, and respect for divine law? If the heart balanced perfectly against the feather, it meant the soul was pure and worthy of eternal life. If the heart was heavier, burdened by sin and wrongdoing, the consequences were dire. The role of Anubis. Anubis, as the god of embalming and protector of the dead, guided the deceased to the scales. His jackal-headed form was symbolic of his guardianship over graves and cemeteries. Anubis carefully placed the heart on one side of the scale, while the feather of Ma'at was placed on the other. His solemn duty was to ensure the weighing was fair and accurate, reflecting divine justice rather than human judgment. If the heart was too heavy, Anubis's role shifted to a grim function. He would allow the monstrous creature Ammit, known as the Devourer, to consume the heart, condemning the soul to eternal destruction. The fearsome Devourer, Ammit was a terrifying hybrid creature, part lion, part hippopotamus, and part crocodile, the three largest man-eating animals known to ancient Egyptians. She waited near the scales to consume the hearts of those deemed unworthy. This consumption did not imply eternal torture, but rather a complete annihilation of the soul. No resurrection, no afterlife, just a final death. To be devoured by Ammit was the worst fate imaginable in Egyptian belief, a complete erasure of existence. This fear added a heavy weight to the process, underscoring the importance of living a virtuous life and preparing thoroughly for the afterlife. Thoth, the divine scribe. As the scales balanced, Thoth stood ready to record the verdict. His ibis-headed form symbolized wisdom, knowledge, and the power of the written word. Thoth's impartial recording ensured the divine justice of the process was maintained, providing a permanent cosmic record of the soul's judgment. His presence also linked the trial to the power of writing, magic, and ritual knowledge, all vital to navigating the afterlife. Confession and the negative confession. Before the weighing, the deceased was expected to make a declaration of innocence, often called the negative confession or declaration of purity. This was a recitation of denials of various sins, such as lying, stealing, murder, or adultery. This confession was a way to assert moral worthiness and was included in the Book of the Dead, guiding the soul through the judgment hall. The negative confession reflected the Egyptian understanding of morality, not just as external rules, but as an internal alignment with Ma'at's principles. The importance of Ma'at. Ma'at was central to Egyptian cosmology. She represented truth, justice, balance, and order, the very fabric of the universe. The weighing of the heart was the ultimate test of adherence to Ma'at's principles. Success meant the soul could join the blessed dead and enjoy eternal life in the field of reeds, a paradisiacal version of Egypt. Failure meant the soul was out of harmony with the cosmic order and would face destruction. The Egyptians believed that Ma'at was upheld not only by the gods, but also by human behavior. The judgment hall emphasized the moral responsibility each person carried. After judgment, eternal life or oblivion. If the heart balanced against the feather, the deceased was declared true of voice, mat keru, meaning they had lived truthfully and justly. Such a soul was granted passage to the eternal afterlife, where it could live in peace and abundance alongside the gods and ancestors. If the heart failed the test, the soul was devoured by Ammit and ceased to exist. This final death was a terrifying prospect, but underscored the importance of living in accordance with Ma'at. The Egyptians did not envision a place of eternal torment for the wicked. Instead, oblivion was the punishment, a complete negation of the soul's existence. Preparation for judgment. The judgment hall and the weighing of the heart shaped many aspects of Egyptian culture and religion. From birth to death, people were taught the importance of living ethically. Funerary practices focused heavily on ensuring the soul would be prepared for judgment. Embalming preserved the body so the soul could recognize and return to it, and funerary texts gave the deceased knowledge to pass the trials. Priests conducted rituals invoking the gods' protection and assistance during judgment. The moral lessons embedded in the judgment hall myth encouraged fairness, honesty, and respect within Egyptian society. Artistic and cultural depictions. The scene of the weighing of the heart was a popular subject in tomb paintings, papyri, and artifacts. These depictions served as reminders to the living of the afterlife's challenges and the moral order of the universe. The symbolic imagery, scales, feather, heart, and gods, created a powerful visual language understood by all Egyptians, reinforcing cultural values. The Judgment Hall's legacy. The Judgment Hall remains one of the most vivid and enduring images of ancient Egyptian religion. It highlights their profound concern with justice, morality, and the fate of the soul. For modern readers, it offers a glimpse into a worldview where life's choices resonate beyond death and where divine balance governs the cosmos. It also reminds us of humanity's eternal quest to find meaning in life and hope in the face of mortality. Anubis and the Scales, Truth, Ma'at, and Eternity. Among the pantheon of ancient Egyptian gods, Anubis holds a particularly profound place as the guardian of the dead and the overseer of the vital ritual known as the weighing of the heart. While many gods played roles in the complex tapestry of Egyptian belief, none were more intimately connected to the soul's passage to the afterlife than Anubis and his sacred scales. This segment explores the role of Anubis, the significance of the scales in ancient Egyptian cosmology, and how the concept of Ma'at, the divine principle of truth and balance, was fundamental not only in the afterlife, but in every aspect of Egyptian life. It also highlights the terrifying consequences of failing the test and how eternity was ultimately granted or denied through this critical process. The jackal-headed guardian. Who is Anubis? Anubis is instantly recognizable by his jackal head, a symbol tied to cemeteries and death in ancient Egypt. The jackal, a scavenger commonly seen around burial sites, was feared but respected, embodying the liminal space between life and death. Anubis's role as protector of graves was critical in a civilization where proper burial rites were believed to safeguard the soul's journey. His domain was the necropolis, the city of the dead, where he watched over tombs, embalming rituals, and the embalmed bodies themselves. But Anubis was more than a guardian. He was a psychopomp, guiding souls safely through the underworld to the Hall of Judgment, where the weighing of the heart took place. The sacred scales, instrument of divine justice. Central to Anubis's function were the scales, magnificent, symbolic balances used to measure the purity of the deceased's heart. This ritual was the linchpin of the afterlife judgment, where the soul's moral weight was assessed against the feather of Ma'at. The scales themselves were not mere physical objects, but sacred tools infused with cosmic power. They represented the equilibrium upon which the universe depended. Order balanced against chaos, truth balanced against falsehood. Anubis's careful hands placed the heart on one pan and Ma'at's feather on the other, watching intently as the two were weighed. The outcome determined the soul's fate, eternal bliss or oblivion. Ma'at, the divine principle of truth and balance. To understand the importance of Anubis and the scales, one must grasp the concept of Ma'at. Ma'at was both a goddess and a cosmic principle, embodying truth, order, balance, justice, and harmony. The Egyptians saw Ma'at as the foundation of existence. Without her, the universe would collapse into chaos. Her feather, light and pure, symbolized the perfect standard against which every soul was measured. Living in accordance with Ma'at was the highest ethical obligation for Egyptians. It governed their social interactions, laws, rituals, and personal behavior. The weighing ceremony, a moment of ultimate truth. The weighing of the heart was more than a ceremony. It was a profound test of the soul's moral worth. When the soul arrived at the Hall of Judgment, Anubis would begin the ritual by placing the deceased's heart on one side of the scales. The heart, considered the seat of the soul's intellect, emotions, and memory, was the true measure of a person's character. On the opposite side was Ma'at's feather, representing absolute truth and justice. As the scales tipped, all stood in silent anticipation. If the heart was lighter or equal in weight to the feather, it indicated a life lived in harmony with Ma'at's laws. The soul was declared pure, worthy of entering the eternal paradise known as the Field of Reeds. If the heart was heavier, burdened by sins and falsehoods, the consequence was dire. The soul was doomed to be devoured by Ammit, the fearsome devourer, and denied eternal life. The role of Anubis as guardian and guide. Anubis's role during the weighing was one of solemn responsibility. He was not only the divine judge's assistant, but the guardian of fairness and balance. His presence ensured that the weighing was conducted without deception or error. In some depictions, Anubis is shown adjusting the scales or comforting the deceased, emphasizing his protective nature. He also oversaw the embalming process, which was believed essential for preserving the body and enabling the soul's recognition and return after judgment. By guarding the tomb and overseeing the weighing, Anubis bridged the worlds of the living and the dead, the physical and the spiritual. The devourer Ammit, the ultimate punishment. If the scales tipped against the deceased, the soul faced Ammit, a composite beast part lion, hippopotamus, and crocodile. Creatures feared for their ferocity. Ammit's role was to consume the heavy-hearted, symbolizing the destruction of the soul. This annihilation was the worst fate, representing eternal death and non-existence. Unlike many religions that envision eternal punishment, Egyptian belief held that failure in the judgment hall meant permanent oblivion, complete erasure from existence. The ethical impact of the judgment on Egyptian society. The judgment scene was not just about the afterlife, but had profound ethical implications for Egyptians in life. The knowledge that one's actions would be judged by Anubis and measured by Ma'at instilled a moral code emphasizing honesty, justice, and order. It reinforced social harmony and respect for divine laws, shaping daily conduct and societal norms. The role of Anubis and the scales symbolized that truth was not merely an ideal, but an essential cosmic reality. Artistic depictions and symbolism. The weighing of the heart was a popular motif in Egyptian art and funerary texts like the Book of the Dead. These images served as reminders to the living of the moral expectations placed upon them and the spiritual realities awaiting after death. Anubis was often depicted with a calm, watchful gaze, the scales delicately balanced, the feather of Ma'at pristine. These visual stories conveyed complex theological concepts in accessible ways, reinforcing cultural values. Anubis and the scales in ritual and magic. Priests performed rituals invoking Anubis's protection and guidance for the deceased. The scales themselves were part of magical and religious symbolism, used metaphorically in spells to help the soul pass the judgment. Amulets bearing the image of Anubis or the scales were common, worn to ensure fairness and protection in life and death. Eternity and the balance of the universe. The scales represented more than a test. They symbolized the cosmic balance on which all life depended. Anubis's role emphasized that truth and justice were eternal principles, governing not only the afterlife but the universe itself. By maintaining Ma'at, both gods and humans preserved the delicate order that allowed creation to flourish. The story of Anubis and the scales reveals an ancient civilization deeply invested in truth, justice, and the eternal consequences of moral actions. In this sacred weighing, the fate of the soul was delicately balanced, a reminder that in the eyes of the gods, every thought, word, and deed carried eternal weight. Anubis, the jackal-headed guardian, stood as a sentinel between life and death, ensuring that the scales of cosmic justice tipped only in favor of truth and mind. Through his vigilant care, the Egyptians found hope that by living rightly, they too could secure a place in eternity. The feather of balance and the order of the cosmos. In ancient Egyptian mythology, few concepts were as foundational or as pervasive as Ma'at, the embodiment of truth, justice, balance, and cosmic order. Ma'at was not merely a goddess, but the principle upon which the universe itself was built, a standard to which gods and humans alike were held accountable. To grasp the true scope of Egyptian belief, one must understand Ma'at, the feather that symbolized her, and the delicate order that governed all existence. Who or what was Ma'at? Ma'at was both a goddess and an abstract principle, often personified as a serene woman wearing an ostrich feather on her head. This feather, slender and light, became the ultimate symbol of balance and truth. The goddess Ma'at represented the intangible force that ensured the cosmos remained in harmony, preventing chaos from overwhelming creation. Unlike many gods who had stories filled with drama and conflict, Ma'at's role was quiet but vital. She was the stabilizing force that held the universe together, the measure against which right and wrong were judged, and the moral compass guiding human conduct. Ma'at's place in Egyptian cosmology. From the dawn of creation, Egyptian mythology tells us the world emerged from a chaotic void called None. Into this chaos, order, Ma'at, was introduced, bringing form and structure to the cosmos. The gods themselves depended on Ma'at's presence to maintain their power and ensure the continuity of life. Ma'at was not static but dynamic, an ongoing process of balancing opposing forces, light and darkness, life and death, order and chaos. Without Ma'at, the natural cycles would falter, the Nile would cease to flood, crops would fail, and society would descend into disorder. The pharaoh, as the divine ruler, was considered the earthly guarantor of Ma'at. His duty was to uphold justice and maintain balance throughout the land, ensuring that society mirrored the cosmic order. The feather, symbolism and significance. The ostrich feather worn by Ma'at became a powerful symbol throughout Egyptian culture. It was the lightest feather, representing purity, truth, and the effortless balance of nature. This feather was not just an adornment, but a tool of judgment. In the afterlife, the heart of the deceased was weighed against Ma'at's feather on the scales overseen by Anubis, as discussed earlier. This weighing tested whether the individual had lived a life in harmony with truth and order. If the heart balanced perfectly with the feather, the soul was declared pure, and granted access to eternal life. If not, the soul was condemned to destruction, forever lost to chaos. The feather's symbolic weightlessness also emphasized that truth and justice should be free of bias and heavy judgment, pure and clear. Ma'at in daily life and society. Ma'at's influence was not confined to the divine realm or the afterlife. It permeated every aspect of Egyptian daily life and governance. The Egyptians believed that by practicing Ma'at, individuals contributed to the stability of society and the cosmos. Honesty, fairness, respect for laws, and harmony within families and communities were expressions of Ma'at. Scribes, judges, priests, and officials often invoked Ma'at when making decisions, reinforcing that their actions aligned with divine order. Justice was not merely a social contract, but a sacred duty reflecting cosmic truth. Legal documents and court proceedings frequently ended with appeals to Ma'at, highlighting her importance as the ultimate arbiter. The concept of truth and justice in Ma'at. Unlike modern legal systems that separate truth and justice into complex procedures, Ma'at unified these ideas into a single concept. Truth was more than factual accuracy. It was living in accordance with the natural order and moral law. Justice was the enforcement of this truth, ensuring that actions contributed to balance and harmony. For the ancient Egyptians, lying, cheating, or disrupting social order was not just a crime against fellow humans, but an offense against Ma'at and the gods. This belief created a society highly attentive to ethical behavior, where maintaining Ma'at was everyone's responsibility. Ma'at's role in Pharaoh's rule. The pharaoh was often described as the Lord of Ma'at, charged with upholding the principle in the kingdom. His legitimacy depended on his ability to maintain balance and order. Historical records and inscriptions show pharaohs declaring their dedication to Ma'at, portraying themselves as protectors against chaos and injustice. Failure to uphold Ma'at risked divine wrath and societal collapse. This responsibility reinforced the pharaoh's role as a mediator between gods and humans. Temples and monuments often depicted the pharaoh offering Ma'at to the gods, symbolizing his role in sustaining cosmic harmony. Ma'at in religion and ritual. Religious ceremonies and rituals frequently invoked Ma'at to restore or maintain balance in the world. Priests performed rites to honor Ma'at and seek her favor, especially during times of crisis like famine, war, or political instability. Offerings and prayers appealed to Ma'at to prevent chaos from overwhelming the land, reflecting the belief that divine order was fragile and required constant renewal. Ma'at was also closely associated with Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, who recorded the results of the weighing of the heart and ensured that truth was preserved. The cosmic balance and the struggle against chaos. The eternal struggle between Ma'at and Isfet, the personification of chaos and disorder, was a central theme in Egyptian mythology. Isfet represented everything that threatened balance: lies, violence, natural disasters, and social unrest. The gods, especially the pharaoh, were warriors against Isfet, constantly battling to preserve Ma'at. This cosmic struggle was reflected in myths, art, and daily life, emphasizing that balance was neither automatic nor guaranteed but required vigilance. Ma'at and human behavior. Individuals were expected to internalize Ma'at, guiding their thoughts, words, and actions. The negative confession, found in the Book of the Dead, lists declarations by the deceased affirming they had not committed acts that violate Ma'at, such as lying, theft, violence, or adultery. This confession was crucial for passing the judgment after death, demonstrating that the individual had lived in harmony with the divine order. In life, Egyptians sought to embody Ma'at by acting justly, maintaining social roles, and showing respect to others. Ma'at and the natural world. The Egyptians saw Ma'at reflected in the natural cycles around them. The flooding of the Nile, the changing seasons, the growth of crops, and the orderly movement of celestial bodies all exemplified Ma'at's presence. Disruption of these cycles was a sign of imbalance and invited divine correction. Farmers, priests, and rulers alike depended on the stable rhythms of Ma'at to ensure prosperity and survival. Ma'at in Egyptian art and iconography. Artistic representations of Ma'at were abundant and symbolic. She was often shown as a woman with an ostrich feather, sometimes holding a scepter or an ankh symbolizing life. Her image adorned temple walls, papyri, and funerary objects, reinforcing her omnipresence. The feather itself became a standalone symbol, representing the ideal of truth and balance in Egyptian writing and jewelry. The enduring legacy of Ma'at. Ma'at's influence extended beyond religion into philosophy, governance, and ethics. Her principles shaped the Egyptian worldview, emphasizing that order, truth, and justice were essential for life itself. Though the ancient Egyptian religion faded, the ideas embodied by Ma'at influenced later cultures and continue to resonate in concepts of law, morality, and cosmic balance. Ra rises, the sun god and the birth of the world. In the vast tapestry of Egyptian mythology, few deities commanded as much reverence and cosmic significance as Ra, the sun god. Known as the creator and the source of all life, Ra's radiant presence illuminated the world, marking the eternal cycle of day and night, and symbolizing birth, growth, and renewal. Understanding Ra's mythos is key to comprehending how the ancient Egyptians viewed the universe, the birth of creation, and their place within this divine order. The primordial beginning, before the sun rose. In the Egyptian conception of the universe's origin, before anything existed, there was only none. The infinite, formless, watery abyss of chaos. This primordial ocean represented potential but lacked form, purpose, and life. Within this swirling void, the first divine spark awaited its moment, a seed of creation that would transform nothingness into the ordered world. Ra was this spark, the self-created god who emerged from the depths of none. In some versions of the myth, Ra rises upon a sacred mound called the Ben-Ben, the first solid land to appear from the chaotic waters. This mound symbolized stability and the first point of life, breaking the endless watery expanse. Ra's emergence from none marked the birth of the sun and the beginning of time, space, and creation itself. The solar deity. Ra was worshipped as the sun god, representing the life-giving power of the sun's light and heat. The sun was central to Egyptian life, nurturing crops, warming the land, and sustaining all creatures. Ra's daily journey across the sky mirrored the sun's path, making him both a celestial ruler and a divine force of nature. Ra was often depicted as a man with the head of a falcon, crowned by a solar disk encircled by a sacred cobra, called the Urias. This disk represented the sun at its zenith, glowing with divine power and authority. The cobra symbolized protection and royal sovereignty, emphasizing Ra's status as the supreme god. The creation myth, how Ra brought the world to life. According to the Heliopolitan creation myth, Ra created himself and then brought forth other gods in the world. After rising on the Ben-Ben mound, Ra spoke the first words, and through his divine speech, life and existence sprang forth. This act of creation by word highlights the sacred power attributed to language and divine will in Egyptian thought. Ra created the first gods, including Shu, god of air, and Tefnut, goddess of moisture, who in turn gave birth to Geb, earth, and Nut, sky. These primordial deities formed the foundational elements of the world, and from their union came the pantheon of gods that populated Egyptian mythology. Ra's role as the creator god extended beyond mere birth. He sustained the world, maintained cosmic order, and provided the vital energy that allowed life to flourish. The daily journey of Ra across the sky, Ra's daily voyage across the sky, was a central element in Egyptian religion and cosmology. Each morning, Ra was believed to be born anew at dawn, rising from the eastern horizon and crossing the heavens in his solar barque, a divine boat that carried him through the day. As he traveled, Ra illuminated the world, providing warmth and life. This journey symbolized renewal and hope, as the sun's rising banished the darkness of night and promised the continuation of life. At sunset, Ra descended into the underworld, the Duat, where he faced a nightly battle against the forces of chaos, primarily the serpent Apophis, Apep. This struggle represented the eternal conflict between order and chaos, Isfet, a recurring theme in Egyptian myth. Ra's triumph each dawn reaffirmed the stability of the cosmos and the persistence of life. Ra's underworld journey and the battle against darkness. During the night, Ra's journey through the Duat was perilous and symbolic. He traveled through 12 gates, representing the 12 hours of the night, accompanied by protective deities and his loyal followers. The serpent Apophis embodied chaos and sought to stop Ra's passage, plunging the world into eternal darkness and disorder. The gods and magical forces assisted Ra in defeating Apophis, preserving cosmic balance and ensuring the sun's rebirth. This nightly journey was not only a mythological narrative, but a spiritual metaphor for overcoming darkness, fear, and uncertainty, both cosmic and personal. Ra's multiple forms and aspects. Ra was a complex deity with various manifestations, each emphasizing different facets of his divine nature. One of his well-known forms was Atum Ra, the creator who embodied completeness and self-sufficiency. At sunrise, Ra appeared as Khepri, the scarab beetle god, symbolizing creation and rebirth. Khepri rolled the sun across the sky like a dung beetle rolling its ball, illustrating the cyclical nature of life and the cosmos. At sunset, Ra took the form of the ram-headed god Khnum, guiding the sun through the underworld to prepare for its rebirth. These transformations reflected Ra's omnipresence and the multifaceted nature of divine power. Ra and Pharaoh, divine kingship. Ra was intimately linked with the institution of pharaohs, who were regarded as his earthly representatives. The pharaoh was often called the son of Ra, or Ra's hereditary son, legitimizing their rule through divine ancestry. This connection underscored the pharaoh's duty to uphold Ma'at, the cosmic order established by Ra. Pharaohs bore titles like Lord of the Two Lands and High Priest of Ra, reflecting their role as intermediaries between gods and people. Temples dedicated to Ra, particularly the great sun temples at Heliopolis, were centers of worship and royal authority. Temples and worship of Ra. Ra's worship was central in Egyptian religion, with numerous temples dedicated to him, especially in Heliopolis, the city of the sun. These temples were architectural marvels designed to honor the sun's power and facilitate rituals that maintained cosmic harmony. Priests of Ra performed daily ceremonies, including offerings, hymns, and prayers timed with the sun's movement. Festivals celebrated Ra's role in creation, the triumph of light over darkness, and the renewal of life. Sacred texts like the pyramid texts and coffin texts contained hymns and spells invoking Ra's protection and favor. Ra's influence on Egyptian culture and thought. Ra's significance extended beyond religion into the broader culture, influencing art, literature, and philosophy. The sun's cycle shaped the Egyptian calendar, agriculture, and daily rhythms. The sun's warmth and light were metaphors for knowledge, clarity, and divine presence. Symbols associated with Ra, like the solar disk, the uraeus, and the scarab, appeared widely in jewelry, amulets, and royal regalia. The idea of divine kingship grounded in Ra's authority shaped political structures and social hierarchies. Ra and other deities, syncretism and collaboration. Over time, Ra was syncretized with other major gods, blending attributes and myths to reflect changing religious landscapes. One notable fusion was with Amun, a powerful Theban deity, forming Amun-Ra, a composite god representing supreme power and hidden mystery. Ra was also associated with Horus, the falcon god of kingship in the sky, combining solar and royal symbolism. These syncretic forms demonstrated Ra's adaptability and central role in Egyptian theology. The eternal cycle, birth, death, and rebirth. Ra's journey epitomized the cyclical nature of existence: birth at dawn, vigor through the day, decline at sunset, and renewal in the night. This cycle mirrored the human experience of life and death, inspiring hope for rebirth and eternal life. Egyptians saw their own mortality reflected in Ra's daily pattern and believed that through rituals and moral living, they could partake in the god's eternal renewal. Ra's enduring legacy. Ra's legacy endured throughout Egyptian history and beyond. His symbolism influenced neighboring cultures and laid the foundation for concepts of divine solar authority. Modern understanding of Egyptian mythology often begins with Ra, whose image as the shining sun god continues to captivate imagination. Ra's story reminds us that even in the ancient world, humanity sought meaning in the patterns of nature and the promise of light overcoming darkness. Exploring the mysterious underworld. The ancient Egyptians viewed death not as an end, but as a complex journey, one that led the soul through a shadowy, mysterious realm known as the Duat. This underworld was a place of transformation, judgment, danger, and hope. The Duat was both feared and revered, a cosmic space where the dead faced trials and where the gods maintained the delicate balance of life, death, and rebirth. To understand the Duat is to step into the heart of Egyptian spirituality, to glimpse how they conceived the afterlife, and to appreciate the intricate mythology that made their civilization one of the most enduring in human history. What is the Duat? The Duat, also spelled Duat, or Tuat, was the Egyptian underworld, a realm beneath the earth and beyond the living world. It was not a simple place of darkness or oblivion, but a complex, multi-layered dimension where souls journeyed after death. Unlike many modern ideas of the afterlife as a static heaven or hell, the Duat was dynamic, filled with gods, spirits, demons, strange creatures, and magical obstacles. It was a realm where time flowed differently, where the laws of the mortal world did not fully apply, and where the deceased's fate was decided. The geography of the Duat, ancient Egyptian texts, including the famous Book of the Dead and the Amduat, describe the Duat as a vast riverine landscape. It was crossed by a great river, often equated with the nighttime journey of the sun god Ra. The Duat was often divided into 12 distinct regions or hours, reflecting the 12 hours of night through which Ra traveled in his solar barque. Each hour represented a different stage of the journey, with its own trials, guardians, and inhabitants. Some depictions show the Duat as a labyrinth of caverns, islands, lakes, and deserts, inhabited by protective deities as well as hostile demons. The role of the Duat in the cycle of the sun. The Duat's most famous role in Egyptian mythology is as the realm through which Ra, the sun god, traveled each night. After setting in the west, Ra's solar barque passed through the Duat during the 12 hours of darkness. This nightly journey was vital. Ra faced challenges, including the serpent Apophis, who sought to destroy the sun and plunge the world into eternal chaos. Ra's successful passage through the Duat and his rebirth at dawn symbolized the triumph of order over chaos and the renewal of life. Thus, the Duat was not just the realm of the dead, but also a cosmic passage for renewal and rebirth. The soul's journey, what happens after death? For ordinary Egyptians, death meant entering the Duat as a soul or Ka. But the journey was perilous and filled with challenges. The deceased had to navigate this realm to reach the afterlife, often called the Field of Reeds, a paradise resembling an idealized version of Egypt. The journey through the Duat involved passing through gates, overcoming obstacles, and facing supernatural beings. The deceased needed to know spells, passwords, and magical knowledge, details painstakingly inscribed in funerary texts to succeed. The Book of the Dead and other funerary texts. One of the most significant sources of knowledge about the Duat is the Egyptian Book of the Dead, a collection of spells, prayers, and incantations designed to assist the deceased in navigating the underworld safely. Other important texts include the Amduat, the Book of Gates, and the Book of Caverns. These works describe the Duat in vivid detail, its geography, inhabitants, dangers, and the divine assistance available to the dead. The spells provided instructions on how to overcome demons, pass gates, and call upon gods for protection. The guardians and inhabitants of the Duat. The Duat was guarded and populated by a host of divine and supernatural beings. Some were protectors, while others were malevolent creatures intent on devouring or punishing the unworthy. Fierce guardians stood at the gates, demanding correct names and passwords. These gates often had terrifying guardians with animal heads, sharp teeth, or multiple limbs. Demons like Ammit the Devourer lurked nearby, ready to consume the hearts of those who failed the judgment. Gods such as Osiris, Anubis, Thoth, and Hathor played crucial roles, guiding souls, conducting judgments, and assisting in resurrection. The weighing of the heart, judgment in the Duat. Perhaps the most famous aspect of the Duat's mythos is the judgment scene in the Hall of Ma'at. Here, the deceased's heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the goddess of truth, balance, and cosmic order. If the heart was pure and balanced, free from sin and wrongdoing, the deceased was allowed to continue on to eternal life. If the heart was heavy with guilt, it was devoured by Ammit, condemning the soul to oblivion. This judgment underscored the moral and ethical expectations of Egyptian society and their belief in personal responsibility in the afterlife. Magical protection and the importance of spells. To survive the dangers of the Duat, Egyptians placed great importance on magical spells and amulets. These were believed to protect the soul from demons, unlock gates, and provide power. Amulets shaped like the Eye of Horus, scarabs, or the Ankh symbol were common grave goods intended to aid the deceased. Magical knowledge was considered as vital as physical preparation for death. The role of Anubis in the Duat. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, was the master of embalming and guardian of the dead. He guided souls through the Duat and presided over the weighing of the heart. Anubis ensured the dead were properly mummified so their souls could survive the journey. His role was vital in helping the deceased maintain their identity and reach the afterlife. The afterlife beyond the Duat. Successfully navigating the Duat led to the Field of Reeds, an idyllic realm of peace, abundance, and eternal life. Here, souls enjoyed an idealized existence, similar to their earthly lives, but free from suffering. This belief in paradise encouraged Egyptians to live morally and to prepare carefully for death, with the hope of continuing life in a perfected form. The Duat's influence on Egyptian culture. The Duat was not just a mythological space, but influenced art, architecture, and religious practices. Tombs and pyramids were designed to reflect the journey through the underworld, with walls inscribed with spells and scenes from funerary texts. Priests performed rituals to assist the dead, ensuring their safe passage and rebirth. The Duat's symbolism permeated daily life, reminding Egyptians of life's fragility and the importance of living in harmony with Ma'at. The mysterious nature of the Duat. Despite centuries of study, the Duat remains a realm shrouded in mystery. Its depiction varies across texts and time periods, reflecting changing beliefs in the personal nature of death and afterlife. For the ancient Egyptians, it was a place of both fear and hope, a liminal space between worlds where the soul was tested and transformed. The solar barque, gods who sail the sky and sea of stars. The solar barque, or the boat of millions of years, was one of the most powerful and enduring symbols in ancient Egyptian mythology, embodying the cyclical nature of life, death, and rebirth. This divine vessel was more than a simple boat. It was a cosmic ark that carried the sun god Ra as he sailed across the sky by day and through the mysterious underworld by night. The imagery of gods sailing the sky and the sea of stars not only captured the Egyptians' awe of the heavens, but also their profound understanding of the cosmos as a living, interconnected realm where divine forces actively maintained order. The solar barque was central to this worldview, representing the journey of light through darkness, the triumph of life over chaos, and the eternal rhythm that kept the universe in balance. From sunrise to sunset, the solar barque was imagined to glide majestically across the vast azure sky. Each morning, Ra emerged from the eastern horizon, seated upon the bow of the barque, radiating brilliant light that bathed the earth in warmth and life-giving energy. The barque itself was often depicted as ornately decorated, crafted from precious woods and metals, carrying not only Ra, but also a host of gods and protective spirits. These divine companions had critical roles in the journey, some to protect the barque from threats, others to maintain the cosmic balance, and still others to assist Ra in his vital mission of illuminating the world. The barque was both a vessel of transportation and a sacred stage upon which the eternal drama of creation and destruction played out daily. The gods aboard the solar barque were not passive passengers, but active participants in the cosmic cycle. Among them was the falcon-headed Horus, a god of kingship and protection, who symbolized the triumph of order and rightful rule. His vigilant gaze swept the horizon, warding off dangers that threatened the barque's progress. There was also Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing, who was said to record the events of the journey, ensuring that the eternal laws of Ma'at, truth, justice, and balance, were upheld. The presence of these gods underscored that the journey was not merely physical, but also spiritual, embodying principles that governed all aspects of existence. The solar barque's daytime voyage was a majestic procession across the sky, with celestial phenomena woven into its mythic narrative. The sun's path was marked by the movement of the stars and planets, which were often envisioned as fellow travelers or cosmic landmarks along the barque's route. Ancient Egyptian astronomers, keen observers of the heavens, saw in the barque's journey a reflection of the natural order, the rising and setting of stars, the phases of the moon, and the changing seasons. This celestial journey was a metaphor for life itself, a constant cycle of beginnings and endings, growth and decay, death and rebirth. As the sun dipped below the western horizon at dusk, the solar barque did not rest. Instead, it embarked on its most mysterious and dangerous leg, the passage through the Duat, the underworld. Here, The barque sailed on the cosmic river, navigating treacherous waters filled with hostile creatures, dark spirits, and the ever-present threat of Apophis, the serpent of chaos. This nightly voyage was as vital as the daytime journey, for it symbolized the sun's descent into death and its subsequent resurrection at dawn. The gods aboard the barque shifted roles, transforming from bearers of light to warriors and protectors, using magic and divine power to shield Ra from destruction and ensure the dawn's arrival. The imagery of sailing through a sea of stars was a profound expression of how the Egyptians viewed the cosmos. The night sky was not an empty void, but a dynamic realm filled with divine presence and activity. The stars themselves were thought to be the souls of the dead, the sparkling lights of the ancestors watching over the living. The Milky Way, often seen as the celestial river, paralleled the earthly Nile, reinforcing the sacred connection between the heavens and the earth. The solar barque's voyage through this starry sea was thus a powerful symbol of the eternal connection between life, death, and the divine order. The barque was also closely linked to the pharaoh, who was considered the earthly embodiment of Horus and a direct representative of Ra. The king's legitimacy rested on his ability to maintain Ma'at and ensure the sun's successful journey across the sky. In temple rituals and royal iconography, the pharaoh was often depicted as the helmsman of the solar barque, steering the vessel through cosmic waters and fighting the forces of chaos. This connection elevated the pharaoh's role from a mere mortal ruler to a cosmic guardian whose actions sustained the universe's harmony. The solar barque thus served as a powerful political and religious symbol, reinforcing the divine nature of kingship and the sacred duty of the ruler. Artistic depictions of the solar barque are found throughout Egyptian temples, tombs, and papyri, richly illustrating this celestial voyage. In temple reliefs, the barque is frequently shown as a long boat with a curved prow and stern, adorned with protective symbols and carrying a retinue of gods. These images often include Apophis writhing beneath the boat or attempting to attack, emphasizing the ongoing battle between order and chaos. Funerary texts, like the Book of the Dead and the Duat, include spells and incantations designed to assist the deceased on their own journey through the underworld, aligning them with Ra's solar barque and offering protection against dark forces. These visual and textual representations were not mere art, but magical tools believed to ensure cosmic and personal survival. The solar barque's symbolism extended into Egyptian religious ceremonies and festivals, such as the Feast of the Valley and the Beautiful Festival of the Valley, where statues of gods were transported on boats, reenacting the divine journey across sacred waters. These rituals connected the community with the divine cosmos, allowing worshippers to participate in the eternal cycle of life and rebirth. The barque was not just a mythic symbol, but a living part of religious life, a bridge between the mortal and the divine realms. Through these celebrations, the Egyptians reaffirmed their faith in the sun's power, the gods' protection, and the universe's order. Moreover, the solar barque was linked to the natural world in profound ways. The Nile River, the lifeblood of Egypt, was often seen as a terrestrial counterpart to the cosmic river on which the barque sailed. The flooding of the Nile, which brought fertility and abundance to the land, paralleled the sun's journey and the promise of renewal. In this way, the barque's voyage was a cosmic reflection of earthly cycles, integrating mythology, ecology, and daily life into a seamless worldview. The gods who sailed the barque were thus guardians not only of the heavens, but also of the natural and social orders on Earth. The concept of the solar barque also influenced Egyptian ideas about the afterlife. The deceased were believed to travel through the Duat in a similar barque, guided and protected by spells and divine assistance, striving to reach the fields of eternal life. This parallel journey underscored the intimate connection between the solar cycle and human destiny, where death was not an end, but a passage toward renewal and eternal existence. The barque was both a vehicle of salvation and a symbol of the soul's transformation, reflecting the deep spiritual insights of ancient Egyptian religion. In the grand narrative of Egyptian mythology, the solar barque was more than a means of transportation. It was a symbol of divine power, cosmic order, and eternal life. The gods who sailed it represented the forces that maintained the balance between light and darkness, life and death, order and chaos. Their journey was a daily miracle, a sacred drama enacted across the heavens and the underworld, assuring the continued existence of the world and the well-being of its inhabitants. Through the solar barque, the Egyptians understood their place in the universe as participants in a cosmic cycle that transcended time, grounded in the divine rhythms of the sun and stars. In essence, the solar barque encapsulated the ancient Egyptians' vision of a universe alive with divine presence and eternal struggle. It was a vessel of hope and renewal, carrying the promise that after every night of darkness, the sun would rise again and life would continue. The gods who sailed its decks were the eternal guardians of this promise, tirelessly battling chaos to preserve the order that sustained all creation. Their journey was a profound metaphor for the human experience, reminding all who beheld its story that even in the darkest times, light and life endure, carried on the sacred currents of the cosmic sea. Sekhmet and Bastet, twin aspects of divine fury and mercy. In the rich and intricate tapestry of ancient Egyptian mythology, few divine relationships are as compelling and revealing as that between Sekhmet and Bastet. These two goddesses, often depicted as feline deities but embodying profoundly different aspects of the divine feminine, represent a fascinating duality, the fierce fury of destruction balanced by the gentle mercy of protection. Together, Sekhmet and Bastet illustrate the complex ways the ancient Egyptians understood power, chaos, and order, reflecting the delicate interplay between wrath and compassion that shapes both the cosmos and human experience. Sekhmet, often known as the Eye of Ra, was the goddess of war, destruction, and healing. Her very name means the powerful or the mighty, and she was depicted as a lioness or a woman with the head of a lioness, symbolizing ferocity and unstoppable strength. In myth, Sekhmet's origins lie in the fiery wrath of Ra, the sun god, who sent her to punish humanity for their rebellion against him. Once unleashed, Sekhmet's rage was so overwhelming and bloodthirsty that she nearly annihilated mankind before Ra had to intervene to stop her destructive rampage. Her breath was said to be fire, and her roar like thunder, embodying the terrifying forces of nature that could both protect and devastate. Yet despite her terrifying nature, Sekhmet was also revered as a powerful healer. The Egyptians believed that she had the power to both cause disease and cure it, making her a crucial figure in medical magic and rituals. Temples dedicated to Sekhmet were places of healing and purification, where priests would invoke her fierce protection to ward off illness and evil spirits. This paradoxical role of a goddess who could both destroy and heal highlighted the ancient Egyptian belief that destruction was sometimes necessary for renewal and balance, and that the divine contained both creative and destructive forces in equal measure. Bastet, by contrast, came to be seen primarily as a goddess of home, fertility, and nurturing protection. Over time, Bastet evolved from an earlier lioness warrior goddess to a more approachable cat goddess, gentle, graceful, and loving. She embodied the warmth and security of the household, protecting women, children, and families from harm, while also defending against evil and chaos. In many ways, Bastet was the softer complement to Sekhmet's fierce power, offering mercy, joy, and life-affirming energy. She was often depicted as a woman with the head of a domestic cat, or as a sleek black cat herself, creatures revered in ancient Egypt for their elegance and hunting prowess. The relationship between Sekhmet and Bastet reveals a profound theological and symbolic theme, the balance of divine fury and mercy. While Sekhmet represented the devastating wrath of the gods unleashed on those who defied order, Bastet stood as the benevolent protector who nurtured and maintained peace within the boundaries of society. These twin aspects of the divine feminine showed the Egyptians that the gods could be both terrifying and loving, that justice could be swift and harsh, but tempered by compassion. This duality was not seen as contradictory, but as complementary, a necessary harmony to sustain Ma'at, the cosmic order. In religious practice, Sekhmet and Bastet were worshipped with different emphases, but often in interconnected ways. Sekhmet's temples, especially in regions like Memphis and Thebes, were centers of ritual power where priests conducted elaborate ceremonies to appease her fierce spirit and seek her healing powers. Statues of Sekhmet were sometimes placed at entrances to temples and tombs as fearsome guardians, warding off evil and protecting the sacred. During times of plague or political turmoil, Sekhmet's fearsome nature was invoked to purge corruption and restore order, reminding the people of the necessary, if harsh, justice of the gods. Bastet's worship was centered in Bubastis, a vibrant city in the Nile Delta, where her temple was a place of joy, music, and communal celebration. The annual festival of Bastet was one of the most popular and lively events in ancient Egypt, drawing thousands of pilgrims who came to honor her gentle protection and fertility blessings. The festivities involved singing, dancing, and offerings, celebrating life and renewal. Bastet's worshippers sought her mercy and favor for their families, homes, and health, recognizing her as a goddess who brought both comfort and safety. Despite their differences, the iconography of Sekhmet and Bastet often overlapped, highlighting their shared feline nature and their essential roles as protectors. Both goddesses wore the solar disk on their heads, linking them to the sun god Ra and the vital energy of the sun. Both were associated with lions or cats, powerful animals embodying strength, agility, and the mysterious balance between grace and ferocity. This shared symbolism underscored their complementary functions as aspects of the divine feminine power that both nurtured life and destroyed threats to cosmic order. The mythological narratives also intertwine the stories of Sekhmet and Bastet, sometimes portraying them as sisters or different manifestations of the same goddess. This fluidity reflected the Egyptians' flexible and symbolic approach to their pantheon, where gods and goddesses could embody multiple roles and merge aspects depending on context and regional belief. This multiplicity allowed worshippers to relate to the divine in ways that addressed their immediate needs, whether calling on Sekhmet's fierce protection during war and crisis, or Bastet's tender care in times of peace and family life. The cultural impact of these goddesses extended beyond religion into everyday life. The Egyptians' reverence for cats was closely tied to Bastet, who was seen as the divine embodiment of the qualities that cats represented: independence, protection, and grace. Cats were protected by law, often mummified and honored, and their presence in households was considered a blessing. This relationship between humans and cats reflected the deeper spiritual connection the Egyptians felt to Bastet and the protective energies she symbolized. Sekhmet's influence, though more fearsome, was no less profound. Her image inspired respect and caution, reminding people of the dangers inherent in disorder and rebellion. The rituals surrounding Sekhmet often involved intense prayers and offerings to appease her anger and gain her favor. In a society where the balance of Ma'at was paramount, Sekhmet represented the divine enforcement of this balance, a force that ensured justice even when it came in the form of destruction. Together, Sekhmet and Bastet embody a profound truth about power and divinity, that strength without compassion can lead to devastation, while mercy without strength can invite chaos. The ancient Egyptians recognized that the divine had to encompass both: fury to defend and destroy evil, and mercy to nurture and protect life. This balance was reflected not only in their myths and religious practices, but also in the way they lived and understood the world around them. In contemporary times, Sekhmet and Bastet continue to inspire fascination and respect. They symbolize the multifaceted nature of power and protection, the complex roles women have played throughout history as both nurturers and warriors, and the enduring human need to balance strength with compassion. Their stories remind us that divine forces, and indeed human ones, are never simply one-dimensional, but are woven from many threads of emotion, intent, and action. By exploring the twin aspects of Sekhmet and Bastet, we gain insight into ancient Egyptian spirituality and its deep understanding of balance and duality. Their legacy invites us to reflect on how we reconcile the fierce and gentle parts of ourselves and the world, offering a timeless lesson on the necessity of both fury and mercy to sustain life, justice, and harmony. Temples and rituals, worship in the land of the Nile. In ancient Egypt, religion was not merely a private affair, but a pervasive and fundamental part of everyday life, culture, and governance. The Egyptians lived in a world saturated by the divine, where gods and goddesses were present in every aspect of existence, from the rising of the sun to the flow of the Nile River. Central to this religious experience were temples, magnificent, sacred spaces dedicated to the worship of deities and the rituals performed within their walls. These temples and rituals formed the heart of Egyptian spirituality, serving as bridges between the mortal world and the divine realm, sustaining the cosmic order known as Ma'at, and reinforcing the social and political structures of the civilization. Temples in ancient Egypt were much more than mere buildings. They were believed to be the earthly homes of the gods themselves. Each temple was dedicated to a specific deity or group of deities, such as Ra, Osiris, Isis, Horus, Anubis, or Bastet. The temple was where the god or goddess resided in physical form, through statues or sacred symbols, and where priests acted as intermediaries, performing rituals to honor, appease, and communicate with the divine. Unlike modern places of worship that often serve large congregations, Egyptian temples were primarily restricted spaces for priests and royalty, reflecting the belief that direct contact with the gods required purity, knowledge, and a sacred setting. Architecturally, temples were designed to convey the power, mystery, and sanctity of the gods. The entrance to a temple was typically marked by a massive pylon, a monumental gateway adorned with carved reliefs and painted scenes depicting the gods' deeds and triumphs. Beyond the pylon lay a series of courtyards, hypostyle halls filled with columns inscribed with hieroglyphics, and increasingly sacred inner chambers. The most sacred part of the temple, the sanctuary, housed the cult statue of the deity. Only the high priest and the pharaoh could enter this innermost sanctum, where the god's presence was believed to be strongest. The spatial progression through the temple, from the public outer courtyards to the secret inner sanctuaries, mirrored the journey from the earthly realm into the divine world. The temples themselves were often aligned with celestial bodies, the Nile's flood cycle, and the solar path, embedding the structure within the cosmic order. This alignment reinforced the temple's role as a microcosm of the universe, a place where heaven and earth met, and where the eternal rhythms of nature and divinity were honored and maintained. Central to temple life were the daily rituals performed by the priesthood. These rituals included washing, anointing, dressing, and feeding the god's statue, believed to imbue the divine presence with life and power. At dawn, priests would awaken the deity with prayers and offerings, opening the temple doors to allow the god to emerge symbolically and bless the land. Incense was burned to purify the space and create a pleasing atmosphere, while chants and hymns echoed through the halls, invoking the god's protection and favor. The offerings placed before the statues, bread, beer, meat, flowers, and precious oils, were not mere gifts but essential acts that sustained the gods in their divine form. These offerings ensured that the gods remained strong and benevolent, able to protect the kingdom and uphold Ma'at. The ritual care of the god's image was a profound act of devotion, emphasizing the reciprocal relationship between humans and the divine. The gods gave life, fertility, and order, while humans maintained the gods through reverence and service. Beyond the daily temple rituals, the Egyptian religious calendar was marked by grand festivals and ceremonies, often tied to the agricultural cycle, celestial events, and mythological anniversaries. These festivals were communal celebrations that reinforced social cohesion and reaffirmed the god's central role in Egyptian life. One of the most famous was the Opet festival in Thebes, which celebrated the union of the god Amun with his consort Mut and their son Khonsu, symbolizing the renewal of royal power and fertility. During Opet, the cult statues were paraded in lavish procession from the temple to the Nile, accompanied by music, dancing, and feasting. The flooding of the Nile itself was deeply connected to religious belief, seen as a divine blessing from Hapi, the river god, and a sign of the god's favor. Temples dedicated to Hapi and other fertility gods conducted ceremonies to ensure the continued arrival of the inundation, vital for Egypt's agricultural prosperity. These rituals combined practical concerns with spiritual reverence, demonstrating how religion permeated every level of Egyptian society. Priests were key figures in this religious ecosystem, trained in complex rituals, hymns, and magical spells. They held immense power, acting as caretakers of divine knowledge and mediators between the gods and the people. The priesthood was hierarchically organized, with high priests serving the pharaoh and the state, while lesser priests tended to more localized cults and temples. Priests also managed temple lands, economic activities, and education, making temples centers of cultural as well as spiritual life. Pharaohs, regarded as divine rulers and incarnations of gods such as Horus and later Osiris, played a pivotal role in temple worship. They were seen as guarantors of Ma'at, responsible for maintaining cosmic harmony through religious and political actions. Pharaohs commissioned the construction of temples, endowed them with land and wealth, and personally participated in key rituals. Their presence reinforced the connection between the earthly and divine realms, legitimizing their rule as ordained by the gods. Rituals extended beyond the temples and daily offerings to include magical practices and funerary rites. Magic, Heka, was integral to Egyptian religion, seen as a force granted by the gods to protect, heal, and influence the world. Priests and magicians used spells, amulets, and incantations to ward off evil spirits, cure diseases, and ensure safe passage to the afterlife. Funerary rituals, centered on the cult of Osiris and the journey through the Duat, the underworld, were elaborate ceremonies designed to secure the deceased's immortality. Mummification itself was a sacred ritual, preserving the body as the vessel for the soul and enabling the deceased to be reborn in the afterlife. Temples dedicated to different gods varied in size, importance, and ritual focus. Some, like Karnak and Luxor in Thebes, were vast complexes that served as political and religious capitals, while others were small shrines scattered throughout villages. Each temple reflected the local needs and the particular attributes of the deity it honored. For example, the Temple of Bastet in Bubastis was famous for its joyous festivals and protective rituals, while the mortuary temples of Osiris focused on resurrection and judgment. The symbolism within temples was rich and multi-layered. Walls were covered with scenes of gods interacting with pharaohs, mythical battles, and cosmic events, often accompanied by hieroglyphic texts recounting prayers and myths. These artistic depictions served both as religious instruction and as magical reinforcement of divine power. Temples were designed to be sensory experiences. Sight, sound, smell, and touch all played roles in creating a sacred atmosphere that transcended the mundane world. One of the most enduring features of Egyptian temple worship was the concept of sacred space and time. Temples were places where time was cyclical, reflecting eternal renewal rather than linear progression. Rituals recreated mythic events such as the death and resurrection of Osiris or the daily journey of Ra across the sky, allowing worshippers to participate in the ongoing drama of creation and destruction. This cyclical understanding of time gave stability and hope in a world marked by change and uncertainty. The influence of Egyptian temples and rituals extended far beyond their original context. They shaped architecture, art, and religious thought for millennia, inspiring other cultures and continuing to fascinate scholars and enthusiasts today. The grandeur and spirituality of Egyptian temples stand as monuments to a civilization deeply committed to understanding its place in the cosmos and maintaining harmony between humans and the divine. In conclusion, temples and rituals in ancient Egypt were vital expressions of faith, community, and cosmic order. They provided a structured framework through which the Egyptians engaged with their gods, sought protection and healing, celebrated life cycles, and prepared for eternity. Through the grandeur of their temples and the solemnity of their rituals, the Egyptians created a living connection to the divine, a sacred heartbeat that resonated through the land of the Nile and shaped one of history's most remarkable cultures. Reflections of immortality, why the gods still speak. Even thousands of years after the sands of the Nile swallowed their ancient temples and their voices seemed to fade into history, the gods of Egypt, Ra, Osiris, Horus, Seth, Anubis, Bastet, and many others, still speak to us. Their myths, symbols, and legacies continue to resonate through the corridors of time, shaping not only our understanding of the ancient world, but also our ideas about life, death, power, and immortality. But why do these gods still have a voice today? How is it that these ancient deities, born from a civilization long gone, maintain such an enduring presence? To grasp this, we must reflect on what these gods represented and why their stories transcend time, culture, and belief. The gods of ancient Egypt were not distant, aloof figures. They were intimately woven into the fabric of daily life, embodying natural forces, human experiences, and cosmic principles. Ra was not just the sun, he was the essence of light and creation itself. Osiris was not only a god of death, but a symbol of renewal and hope. Horus stood for kingship and justice, Seth for chaos and conflict, Anubis for death's guardianship, and Bastet for protection and fertility. Their stories told of struggles that were not merely mythic, but mirrored the challenges faced by individuals and societies: survival, power, betrayal, love, death, and rebirth. This universality is a major reason why these gods continue to speak. Their myths address the deepest questions of human existence. Where do we come from? What happens after death? How do we find balance in a chaotic world? These themes are timeless, and the rich symbolism of Egyptian mythology offers answers that remain relevant. For example, the cycle of Ra's journey across the sky and Osiris's resurrection reflect nature's rhythms and the human condition. This connection to natural cycles allows the gods to remain meaningful even when the religious systems that birthed them have faded. The physical remnants of their worship, the pyramids, temples, statues, and tomb paintings, are powerful conduits of their enduring voice. Walking among the ruins of Karnak or Luxor, gazing upon the carved hieroglyphs that tell tales of gods and pharaohs, one feels a palpable link to the past. These monuments are not silent relics. They are echoes of an ancient dialogue between humanity and the divine. Archaeologists, historians, and Egyptologists work tirelessly to translate and interpret these texts, uncovering wisdom encoded in symbolism and ritual. Each discovery renews our understanding and fuels the gods' ongoing narrative. Moreover, Egyptian mythology influenced other cultures and religions. The Greeks, Romans, and later civilizations absorbed and adapted Egyptian ideas. Isis, for example, became a goddess worshipped throughout the Mediterranean. Concepts of judgment after death and resurrection echo in later religious traditions. In this way, the Egyptian gods became part of a larger story of human spirituality and mythology, their echoes woven into the cultural DNA of the West and beyond. In modern times, the fascination with Egyptian gods has been reignited through popular culture, literature, and art. Films, novels, and video games have reimagined these deities for contemporary audiences, often blending ancient symbolism with new interpretations. This revival keeps the gods alive in collective consciousness and invites each generation to explore their meanings anew. For some, the gods remain objects of spiritual reverence; for others, sources of inspiration or mystery. At a deeper level, the gods speak to the human yearning for immortality, not just physical, but spiritual and cultural. Ancient Egyptians sought eternal life through the afterlife, but we also seek immortality through memory, story, and legacy. The gods are immortal because their stories are retold and reinterpreted, continuing to teach us about resilience, justice, love, and transformation. They remind us that endings lead to new beginnings, a concept deeply embedded in the human psyche. Their voices also remind us of the importance of balance, ma'at, in our lives. The ancient Egyptians saw the cosmos as a fragile balance between order and chaos, light and dark, life and death. This balance was not only cosmic but personal. The gods' stories urge us to live ethically, respect nature, and acknowledge the cycles of change. In a world often marked by turmoil and uncertainty, these lessons remain vital. Yet the gods also challenge us. They confront us with the reality of death and the mysteries beyond, questions that every culture struggles to answer. Through Osiris's resurrection and Ra's nightly battle with Apophis, we glimpse the struggle inherent in existence and the hope for renewal. This duality resonates in our own experiences of loss and hope, fear and courage. In academic and spiritual circles alike, Egyptian gods continue to inspire debate and interpretation. Scholars analyze their myths to uncover historical truths and cultural values, while spiritual practitioners seek personal meaning and connection. The gods speak across these disciplines, offering a bridge between the ancient and the modern, the scientific and the mystical. The enduring appeal of these gods also lies in their complexity. They are not simplistic or one-dimensional, but embody contradictions and nuances. Seth is both villain and necessary force of change. Bastet is protector and fierce defender. Ra is life-giver and destroyer of enemies. This complexity reflects the multifaceted nature of reality itself, making the gods relevant to the complexities of human life. So why do the gods still speak? Because they are living stories, dynamic and adaptable, rooted in universal human concerns. Their myths encapsulate truths about the world and ourselves that transcend time. They offer comfort in the face of mortality, inspiration in times of struggle, and guidance for ethical living. They connect us to a civilization that mastered the art of blending myth, ritual, and daily life into a harmonious whole. As you drift to sleep, consider this. The gods of ancient Egypt remain present in our collective imagination, whispering from the ruins, from sacred texts, and from the symbols etched into our cultural heritage. They remind us that while we may not last a day in their ancient world, their stories last millennia, an immortal echo of a civilization that understood that endings are merely beginnings, and that through memory and myth, the gods will always speak. Which god or myth spoke to you the most? What did you learn about ancient Egyptian beliefs that surprised or moved you? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts with others who walk this mythic path beside you. Your voice is part of this story now.